Audiobook by Fate's Reader. Don't forget to subscribe and like the channel for more epic series. Drop your recommended novel below. We love to know what you want to hear next. Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 241. Chapter 241, The Next Human Emperor. They went back on the path they had come from, and when Qin Mu saw that empty village again, he walked into the room that had pasted the Shi word and picked up that baby clothes that had the Qin word sewed on it. The more he cared, the more flustered he became. When he had come here the first time, he was deeply affected and couldn't keep calm for a long time. Therefore he couldn't see any of the tiny clues. The Qin word on these items that apothecary had brought out was nearly the same as the one of that baby clothing. They looked like they came from the same template, but if one examined carefully, there was still some difference. Qin Mu had learned calligraphy from deaf before, and if he could calm his heart down to look at it with an ordinary state of mind, he could also see that the Qin word on the baby clothing was different from the Qin word on his jade pendant. However, his emotions were out of control then, which had influenced his judgment. Now that he had examined carefully, the Qin word on this baby clothing should have been traced out before sewing thread by thread onto the clothing. The Qin word was indeed different from the one on his jade pendant. The other people in the village surrounded village chief and patriarch to ask them about their encounters and what they had seen on that ship. Village chief shook his head. It was too dangerous inside and we didn't delve deeper. We only circled around the outskirts and had almost died. Luckily, Mute was here, therefore we could safely retreat. Everyone immediately asked Mute how he knew about that safe path and managed to bring village chief, patriarch, and the rest in and out. Qin Mu walked out of the courtyard and he had the same suspicions as well. Even Duqian Devil King said he would take 1 to 2 years' time to find a safe path into that ruined ship if his true body descended, so why did Mute manage to barge in so easily? Everyone kept asking him for a long time and Mute didn't say anything. He only revealed an honest smile and gave 2 AHS when he got anxious from the pressing questions. Everyone immediately looked at Deaf. Deaf and Mute were the closest buddies and Deaf knew Mute's intention the best. Deaf was always the one translating when everyone didn't understand what Mute meant. However, Deaf was at a loss this time. It was obvious he didn't know what Mute was saying as well. "This Mute don't want to say anything," Granny C said angrily. "You'll stifle to death sooner or later." Everyone rest in this small village while that dragon Qilin stuck close to the young patriarch. Now, this dragon Qilin was full of energy and rubbing himself around patriarch. Patriarch struck a posture wanting to beat him, which managed to chase him further away. However, he would come back in the next moment and raised his dragon tail as he rubbed against the young patriarch's clothes, which were now filled with holes made by him. "You're getting too fat," the young patriarch said bitterly. "I had already said I'm going to die of old age. I'm abandoning you. Stop rubbing yourself on me. Don't think of jumping into my arms. I can't carry you now. Shoo shoo. Go away." On the other hand, Blind was annoying Duqian Devil King about some questions regarding algebra. Duqian Devil King was slightly fearful of the people in the village. Therefore, he also tried his best to answer his questions. However, he only answered Blind's questions and didn't offer to impart more profound algebra to him. Apothecary hurried from person to check on their injuries and treating them. Qin Mu walked into that house. Even though this might not be the house of his parents, this place made him feel at peace. Mute also walked in and looked around. His rough hands caressed that small wooden horse and picked up that piece of clothing. This thick and solid man had a very gentle gaze. Qin Mu looked towards him and Mute turned his head to give him a grin. "Gai zou le. It's time to go." Granny C hurried. "Go back to the village to celebrate New Year's Day. Patriarch, that plump pig that you had raised can finally be slaughtered to eat. Butcher is skillful at that and can still whip up a few good dishes. Just enough for 2 tables. You dare." The young patriarch was nervous and shouted, "Don't think about touching him. Ever since you were young you were already sneaking crafty glances at my dragon Qilin, always wanting to eat him. Go away. Stop rubbing against me. I'm not gonna pat you. Elder of Discipline, drag him away." Elder of Discipline chased the dragon Qilin over to Qin Mu. The young patriarch looked over and saw the dragon Qilin moving its buttocks to walk to Qin Mu. He was so fat that his buttocks were as round as a ball. He was as fleshy as rhinoceros, and every time he took a step, his round buttocks would jiggle uncontrollably. This fellow must have been cadging meals from the cult master, and his meals aren't bad as well. When I met him back then, he was small like a cat and rubbed himself against my leg to cheat food out from me. He ended up becoming fatter and fatter from me feeding him and glued himself to me. The young patriarch sighed. The dragon Qilin then was so small and he could even embrace him and caress his head. What a huge ship! Everyone came to the front of Moon's ship and couldn't help being astonished. Cripple planned to steal this ship away and got scolded by Granny C. Damned Cripple! Even if you can steal it, where are you going to park it? I'll break your leg if you place it in the village. Cripple could only drop his thoughts. He asked Qin Mu how he had managed to drive this ship here, and after hearing Qin Mu's encounter of driving the ship, Cripple's thoughts sprung into action again. Attaining the mighty strength of Heavenly God after becoming the Moon Guardian? He quickly ran to touch the giant pillar on the ship, but when he found that there was no transformation, he could only return. There were too many unsolved mysteries in Great Ruins, and Moon Ship was just one of them. When they walked out of that formless barrier, the sun was already hanging high up in the sky. It was noon, but the weather was still very cold as snow had fallen some time ago, and the land had a brilliant snow-white cover. The mountain ranges were also dyed in white, and they gave off crunching sounds as they walked in the snow. There were a few bears hiding in the hollow tree in the ruins, and the mother bear was embracing the baby bears while sleeping soundly. When that mother bear saw Qin Mu and the rest suddenly appearing, she opened her eyes in astonishment but was so lazy that she didn't move. She only nudged her body before going back into hibernation. Qin Mu looked back and saw the barrier vanishing. That unimaginable huge ship that was sealed inside, Moon Ship, as well as the incomparably complicated cube seal had all vanished. What replaced it was a vast forest. Only when the night fell would this mysterious seal appear once again. Let's go. Let's return to the village for New Year, Village Chief said calmly. Everyone began to return, and this place was very far from disabled elderly village. The journey would still take 1 to 2 days, but it was a good thing that everyone was safe. The second evening, they had finally returned back to disabled elderly village. Qin Mu, Granny C, and Old Ma started to get busy decorating the village and preparing New Year's Day dinner. Qin Mu brought red paper over for Def to write the auspicious words and spring festival couplets. He then called Qin Mu over to let him paste them on everyone's door. Paste it on the chicken coop also. As well as that ancient tree in front of the village, paste one there to invite prosperity in. Granny C instructed. Everyone worked hard for quite some time, and finally, everyone in the village could sit down to eat and drink fine wine together in cheers and laughter. The young patriarch and elder of discipline also sat down and joined them in the hearty New Year's Day dinner that had come late. Early next morning, the young patriarch and elder of discipline bade farewell. There are still countless mysterious and great ruins, and it would be pleasant to search and take a look at them before I die. Fellow Tao friends, there's no need to send me off. When he was done, the young and the old left towards the distance while stepping through the thick snow. Dutian Devil King looked at Qin Mu and said, Devil Cult Master, it's time to keep your promise. Qin Mu said with a firm look, Devil King, don't worry. I'll keep my promise and release you. Blind and Cripple came forward, and Dutian Devil King became extremely nervous before shouting, Devil Cult Master, are you thinking of letting them capture me again after releasing me? How dare you? Qin Mu was a little embarrassed and shook his head at Cripple and Blind. Cripple muttered, This fellow is a good helper, and if I can make him stay, I can steal even more stuff. Qin Mu said warmly, Devil King, don't worry. I shall remove these sealing runes on your body, and you'll be able to regain your freedom. He undid the sealing runes on Dutian Devil King's body one by one, and only then did Dutian Devil King become at ease. Little buddy Qin, Dutian and here are two different worlds. After we part today, we may never meet each other again. After all, the life of you mortal are short, and your lifespan is merely a flick of a finger to us, over in an instant. Maybe when I think of you again, you have already died thousands of years earlier. This is actually quite sad now I mention about it. Qin Mu smiled. Devil King, I can also contact you frequently. I still know ghost transferring god dispatching runes command from great mountain sect. Dutian Devil King laughed loudly. Your world is too dangerous, and even if you summon me over, I won't come. After I go back, I'll be looking for a new world for my people to survive. Qin Mu undid the last of the seal and said, Devil King, you can return now. Dutian Devil King gave a try and discovered that there was really no seal before becoming fully at ease. Let us never meet again. Once he said that, his consciousness tunneled into the void and vanished. Qin Mu raised his head and smiled. Who can tell what will happen in the future? Dutian Devil King's consciousness returned to Dutian world and went back into his original body. That majestic Dutian Devil King immediately knew what this consciousness had encountered and was greatly shaken. Letting out a murky breath, he thought to himself, a dangerous world that is being monitored by gods. It's indeed not a dwelling place for my Dutian citizens. Looks like it's time to find a new world. Mu'er, come over. Village chief called out. Qin Mu hurried over and village chief hesitated for a moment. I pondered for quite some time, but there is still something I have to tell you. Other than the numerous Qin word I have found on that ship, I had also found something else. Apothecary. Bring that thing over. Apothecary hesitated. Is it suitable to give it to him now? Village chief shook his head. I don't have much long to live, and if I don't give it to him, when should I give it to him? Apothecary took out a mirror and handed it over to Qin Mu. Qin Mu took over the mirror and didn't find anything unusual about it. Village chief said, inside this mirror is a geographical map which leads to Carefree Village. We have found this on that ship. You can stop examining it. This mirror has been sealed by me. Only when you can break my seal you can see the route in this mirror. That place is too dangerous and I don't want to let you go there now. Qin Mu was silent. Suddenly he knelt down and kowtowed to village chief. Village chief immediately said, get up, there's one more thing. Suddenly I feel that there are quite a number of weights on your shoulder, the young cult master of Heavenly Devil Cult, the orphan of Carefree Village. Maybe it won't be much if you take on my responsibility as well. Today, I shall take you in as my disciple and hand over my responsibility to you. From today onwards, you will be the next generation's Human Emperor. Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 242. Once more. The next generation's Human Emperor? Qin Mu was bewildered. This title was slightly weird. There was obviously an emperor in this world, as well as cult and sect masters of all the various big sections. Everything was being managed and governed, so what would the human emperor do? There seemed to be no free space in this world that the human emperor could rule. Human emperor is not high above, and he doesn't have any power, only responsibility, village chief explained. Human emperor is not a position from which you will rule over all living things, nor will it let you give you supremacy to recklessly wage wars to kill those that don't submit to you. Human emperor is a state of mind, a kind of righteousness and justice. Every human emperor has a treasured seal which has been handed down since the first generation human emperor. I've thrown in under the bed, so go and fetch it. Qin Mu went to village chief's room, and there was indeed a black lump under the bed. Once he took it out, he saw that it was a palm-sized black iron seal, and with birdworm seal script carved onto it. Qin Mu passed the black iron seal to village chief, who said, this is the human emperor's seal, the supreme sacred artifact of our bloodline. Qin Mu looked at the seal and mumbled, village chief, does our bloodline have any other sacred artifacts? Angered, village chief smashed the human emperor's seal onto Qin Mu's head, causing a big swelling on his forehead. This iron lump was then placed into Qin Mu's hands. Village chief said, the human emperor's seal has been passed to you, so you are now the next generation's human emperor. So simple. Qin Mu was stunned. Apothecary was also shocked. Village chief had always said that his responsibility was too huge, his burden was too heavy, and the title of human emperor was too powerful and shocking. Because of that, he always thought that a grand ceremony would have to be held for Qin Mu to inherit the position of human emperor. Never did he expect village chief to just throw a black lump at Qin Mu and be done. There are not many who know about the title of human emperor anymore. We are not a sect, nor are we emperors of a country. It's just an inheritance. It's passed down from generation to generation, so there will only be one in each generation, and usually the smartest person with the best comprehension will be found to inherit the title. The smartest one in this generation is Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, but I don't think he would be interested. He has also already gone down his own path, so it would be hard for him to accept my inheritance and responsibility. Village Chief sighed. I'm also too lazy to go out, so after thinking for quite some I decided that you barely make the cut. Qin Mu consoled. Village Chief, don't force yourself. I think you can still find someone better. Apothecary had a weird expression while Village Chief almost died from holding back. The brat was obviously finding it troublesome, and since there were no benefits, he really wasn't willing. Your guts have grown quite a lot since you went out. How dare you be sarcastic? Village Chief sneered. Are you going to be the human emperor or not? Qin Mu begrudgingly said, Sure. Just give me all the dirty work. There's already plenty of it I have to do, so an extra human emperor won't make a difference. Village Chief was speechless from anger. He wished he could grow out an arm just to knock the youth on the head as he scolded. Countless people begged me to teach them my sword techniques, but I didn't teach them. They begged me to leave behind my inheritance to them, but I didn't give it to them. How dare you reject it like that? Qin Mu lowered his head and kicked away a pebble as he said resentfully, I'm not rejecting. It's just that this title doesn't have any use. Village Chief, why don't you just teach me your sword skills and pass this title of human emperor to someone else? Village Chief smiled with anger and looked at Apothecary. You say, is he rejecting it or not? Is it that embarrassing to be the human emperor? You're getting more and more ballsy. Apothecary coughed and said, You two shall slowly talk this out. I will go take a look at my worms so that they don't freeze to death. Village Chief was filled with anger, but then he suddenly came to the realization and broke out laughing. Other people begged me to teach them, but I didn't, and now you're making me change my way to beg you to learn, is that right? You're becoming more and more mischievous. Honestly, you're really not fit to be the human emperor. I'm just really too lazy to go out. Else I would definitely find an even more outstanding youth than you. Qin Mu muttered softly with a pout. I have an overlord body? Who can be better than me? Village Chief almost choked to death. Qin Mu immediately went forward to massage the old man's back, and Village Chief regained his breath. So when Qin Mu was about to say something, the old man said, Stop talking and let me relax. It's too much for my brain to handle. The corners of the old man's eyes twitched. As the initiator of the lie, he had finally received his comeuppance. After some time, he managed to recompose himself. It had been just a white lie which everyone took for a truth, for which he felt secretly proud since everyone believed in it. Yet now he had chosen Qin Mu as his successor, so could he have also come to believe that the youth had an overlord body? Too many lies make me have no choice but to believe them even when I clearly know they're not the truth. Oh well. Village Chief relaxed and smiled. We, as the human emperors, only have one responsibility. Light burst forth from his eyes as though countless sword lights were coming, dazzling Qin Mu's eyes. To cut down gods, devils, and heaven itself. What belongs to the gods is managed by gods. What belongs to the devils is managed by devils. What belongs to the humans is managed by humans. If gods or devils dabble with this, we'll cut off their hands. If gods or devils stick their necks out, we'll cut off their heads. This is the most basic responsibility of the human emperor. When you get stronger, you will have even more responsibilities. To cut down gods, to cut down devils, to cut down heaven. Slay your way up to heaven. EY, come back. Qin Mu threw the human emperor's seal back into Village Chief's hand and turned around to walk away. Village Chief blew up, and his vital chi transformed into a huge hand to grab him back by his collar. With a pleasant countenance, he said, You are the human emperor of this generation, so how can you not know the aim of our bloodline? I haven't finished. Still trying to run? Apothecary, help me grab him. Apothecary didn't come, but Qin Mu still couldn't break free and was forced to give up. Village Chief continued, There aren't many rules for our bloodline bearers, and the aims are only these. I will impart my sword skills to you, but how much you will be able to comprehend will be up to you. That's right, we also have the Hall of Human Emperors, so you can drop by when you are free to witness the meritorious exploits of the past human emperors. Also, even if my sword skills are not bad, but if a god or devil saw you using them, they will definitely make a move to kill you. Stop running, you can't escape my grasp. I didn't run back then and succeeded this inheritance without thinking it through. Granny, save me. Qin Mu called out for help. Granny C was full of smiles as she told Blind beside her. Village chief, that old fellow is finally willing to teach Moore his legacy. Look, Moore is so happy that's he going to cry. Blind turned his head and said in suspicion, I heard him calling for help. He's elated. Granny C beamed. Village chief's legacy has made countless people envious. He was the #1 man in the world back then, the famous sword god, so Moore is naturally speaking incoherently from being overjoyed. Qin Mu simply couldn't break free, so he had to accept his fate and throw the human emperor's seal into his Tao Tai sack. Village chief was very pleased. You have already learned the first move of sword picture, sword treading mountains and rivers. Now show me if you improved any after this while. Qin Mu acknowledged this and executed sword treading mountains and rivers. His execution was different from what village chief had taught him, since he had incorporated Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's spiral sword form, drill sword form, and swim sword form into it and added numerous variations. After executing the move, Qin Mu retracted his sword chi back and looked at village chief nervously. Village chief was astonished and seemed to be thinking as he said, This is the basic sword form Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor taught you? Qin Mu nodded. Village chief, I changed the sword treading mountains and rivers that you taught me, disrespecting you. Do you want to fire me and find another human emperor? Not bad, not bad, village chief praised. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor is not bad, to be able to be original and create new moves on top of the 14 basic sword forms. He is indeed more suitable to be the human emperor. However, you aren't bad as well, to not stick by the rules and even dare to execute the sword-treading mountains and rivers you changed in front of me. Very well, very well. Your vital chi thread has also changed. Did you use spiral sword form to refine your chi into a thread? Qin Mu nodded. Village chief said, I shall use my 5 elements realm's cultivation, while you will use your new sword-treading mountains and rivers, and we will exchange a blow. Qin Mu's eyes lighted up and he smiled. Village chief, if I defeat you with my move, can I not be the human emperor? Village chief revealed a smile and refined his chi into a sword while saying leisurely, All right, if you can defeat me, I'll bring the human emperor's seal to the grave. Qin Mu took a deep breath, and his body suddenly changed. He transformed into the form of Venus Sovereign that had the head of a white tiger and stood on 2 dragons. His vital chi transformed into gold chi, and he gathered his chi into a sword whose sword lights instantly exploded forth. Sword treading mountains and rivers. Under his sword, the mountains and rivers appeared like a painting being unscrolled to cover the entire village, sending village chief inside it. Not only had he incorporated Imperial Preceptor's basic sword form, he had also incorporated the path of painting that Def had taught him. With thousands of mountains and rivers bombarding the opponent's face, it was as if the attack was a real world. This kind of profound sword skill could no longer be described as a sword skill. It was a path, the path of a sword. His sword treading mountains and rivers unleashed its full power, and at that moment village chief's sword light flickered. It was sword treading mountains and rivers as well, so it was like 2 worlds colliding with each other. No sword light could be seen as a terrifying power burst forth. Chi, 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 chi. Dozens of blood lights appeared around Qin Mu's body as he got injured in numerous places and flew backward. When he crashed into the wall of Butcher's shop, sword lights appeared and carved a pattern of mountains and rivers around him. These were the traces left behind by village chief's sword lights. Once more, Qin Mu shouted out and sealed the wounds on his body as he rushed towards village chief to execute sword treading mountains and rivers again. The next moment, a human figure flew out and crashed into Old Ma's house. There was another pattern of mountains and rivers around the youth. Qin Mu was stunned as he slid down from the wall. Applying the dragon's saliva on himself, He pondered hard and continued improving his sword, treading mountains and rivers. After some time, he rushed towards village chief once again. Once more! Boom! The wall of the smithy gained the imprint of a human, and around it was the pattern of mountains and rivers. This pattern was poles apart from the pattern on the other walls. Every time village chief made a move, the patterns of the mountains and rivers were different. Mute popped his head from the smithy and took a look at Qin Mu before laughing silently. Qin Mu's face turned black as he applied the medicine before continuing to rack his brains. Getting rid of all the weakness in his move, he improved the sword skill. Once more, a human figure flew through majestic mountains and rivers before crashing into death's wall. Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 243. Convinced. Qin Mu smashed into walls time again and again, and pictures of mountains and rivers appeared in almost every wall in disabled elderly village. Only Granny C's house was not imprinted. Qin Mu wanted to rush over once more when he realized that his vital qi was depleted. He couldn't help but feel stunned by this. Defeated. Overlord Body was defeated. It had suffered a crushing defeat. Not only was his sword techniques not on par with those of village chief, even the density of his vital qi could not be compared to that of village chief. It looked like he could only take over the title of human emperor. Village chief said gently, "You can wait for your vital qi to recover before coming again." Qin Mu composed himself. "Okay." Village chief's expression darkened as he saw the cowherd boy sprinting away to cultivate his weird Overlord Body 3 elixir technique. "You cheated," Apothecary said as he came over once. He saw Qin Mu's figure disappearing into the distance. Village chief was stunned. "Did I?" Apothecary sneered. "Your sword skills exhaust an extreme amount of vital qi, and with the density of your cultivation, you can execute them twice in 5 elements realm, 3 times at most. How many times have you executed them just now?" "About 7 times, right?" Village chief couldn't keep a straight face and muttered, "The density of my vital qi is not as you imagine. If I control it and use the lowest amount possible, I can execute my skills 4 times. However, Moore's vital qi is indeed dense. I thought my and his vital qi reserves in 5 elements realm wouldn't be too different, but to my surprise." Apothecary laughed. "To your surprise, he's a huge cauldron and you're only a barrel." Village chief sighed and shook his head. "His qi is several times denser than mine in spirit embryo realm, but it's not possible for it to be so much denser than mine in 5 elements realm. I had no shortcomings in my 5 elements realm, but he also has no shortcomings. You noticed it too, but didn't say it out." Apothecary smiled. "He already lost to you with the same sword skill, so why do I need to say anything? However, earlier you said that the title of human emperor only has responsibilities and burdens but no benefits. Isn't that false?" Village chief said lazily. "What benefits does it have? How come I don't know them?" Apothecary's eyes flickered over. "I heard some legends about human emperors and their seal. Human emperor's seal is related to many ancient inheritances, and some of them can be traced all the way back to tens of thousands of years ago. Some sacred grounds were founded by human emperors, and I've heard that the human emperor's seal is even more useful than the emperor's jade seal." Village chief said indifferently. "That's a legend from God knows how many years ago, and the human emperor's seal is merely a black iron lump. Who would listen to a black iron lump?" Apothecary smiled. "Legend says that once the human emperor's seal is used, one can command all the heroes of this world." Village chief yawned and said lazily, "Human emperor's seal is with Moore. You can let him take it out and show it off, see which sect will be willing to hear his command. It'll be lucky if he won't be beaten to death." Apothecary said resentfully, "You clearly knew it was this dangerous, so why did you pass the human emperor's seal to him?" Village chief was no longer lazy and a sword light flashed across his eyes as he said solemnly, "This is a responsibility and also a burden. When this burden was placed on my shoulders, I couldn't carry it so my limbs were severed. However, someone must carry this burden. I can't take it into the grave with me. Some things must be done even if it's clearly known that they're dangerous." Village chief let out a shaky breath and said, "If something is done, there's a possibility of failure and even death, but there's also a slither of hope. If nothing is done, there won't even be a slither of hope. What the past human emperors did is much more than what you can imagine. Mu is pretty good, Apothecary said in sorrow. I only feel pained for Mu to be pulled into your old path. How can he win against you? He can't win. Village Chief's tone had a hint of pride when he said, he will never win against me using sword treading mountains and rivers. This skill may be formed by the 14 basic sword forms, but after me polishing it, there's already no flaw in it. When he wanted to incorporate the 3 basic sword forms of Imperial Preceptor into my sword skill, he had to make some changes. Even though his ideas were good, his horizons aren't as broad as mine. A single change will create a flaw, and the more he changes, the more flaws will appear. Apothecary was dumbfounded. He let out a shaky breath and looked at Qin Mu, who was currently sprinting, and felt pity. However, he can borrow my hand to polish his sword skill. Village Chief smiled. The more he changes the sword treading mountains and rivers, the more he will understand the sword. The more he understands, the more likely he will be to step away from sword techniques, step away from sword skills, and come closer to the path. If his understanding of the sword reaches the level of the path, it will no longer matter if there are 14 or 17 basic sword forms. Learning sword skills and using sword skills is only the realm of technique. It's learning and using something. If one wants to go higher, they will have to innovate, which is where Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor is on right now. To go one step further, one would have to abandon skill and technique, which is the realm of path. Village Chief said, Mu is currently between technique and skill. For him to use my hand to polish his sword skill is much better than for him to improve by me teaching him sword skills. After some time, Qin Mu's cultivation recovered to its peak, but he didn't find Village Chief straight away. Instead, he sat down and comprehended quietly. He tried to perfect his own sword treading mountains and river so that there was no flaw. What he wanted to do was to incorporate Imperial Preceptor's 3 basic sword forms into sword treading mountains and rivers and not leave any flaw. He definitely couldn't defeat Village Chief using Village Chief skills, but if he improved on them, there was a chance he might win. He comprehended diligently, and all the sword moves in his mind were messed up before they were reorganized again. He then simulated an image of clashing with Village Chief's sword skill in his mind. However, every clash ended in a defeat. Various battles were simulated in his mind, but no matter how he improved, he couldn't change his defeat. Sometime later, Qin Mu roused his spirit and stood up. In the storm in his mind, he had finally managed to defeat Village Chief with his new sword skill, so he rushed over with excitement. Village Chief, once more. Village Chief beamed. Okay. Qin Mu rushed over and executed his improved sword skill. He then flew high up into the air and left a trail of blood in midair before crashing into the chicken coop. A dozen hen dragons clucked and rushed over fiercely. Qin Mu immediately rose into the air, and the hen dragons also flapped their wings to fly. Their feathers were like swords and they spewed fire at him. Mountains and rivers suddenly appeared in midair and flooded the dozen hen dragons. After one move, they fell bare from the sky, and their feathers fluttered everywhere. Qin Mu landed on the ground, stunned. The hen dragons clucked and ran back into the chicken coop, closing the wooden door and not daring to show their faces again. Cluck, cluck! The old hen clucked in a stern tone. Qin Mu waved his hand and a few traces were left on the wooden door by his sword chi. The chicken coop was in a flurry. Qin Mu was stunned and looked at his hand. When had he become so powerful? Mu is so suave. He can finally defeat chickens. Cripple praised. Qin Mu's face turned slightly red, but he continued to concentrate on comprehending what he felt. Suddenly, Mute threw a sword pellet over and signaled, ABA, ABA. Ah! Qin Mu thanked Mute. What Mute meant was that he had just created a sword pellet and he should try it out. He gripped the sword pellet tightly, and his vital chi rushed into it. Countless sword lights instantly flew out, and they were the rays of swords which seemed to have no substance. They could warp according to his will and be as natural as his vital chi. Qin Mu grasped the sword pellet and gave a punch forward. The sword rays in the sword pellet instantly transformed into a huge dragon which rushed out and roared through the small village. Qin Mu jumped in shock, and village chief also jumped in shock before giving an angry stare to Mute. Qin Mu retracted his fist, and his mind moved slightly. He could feel as if the sword pellet that he was gripping tightly was melting. He took a firmer grip of it, and the sword rays transformed into a huge smithing hammer. When he smashed down with a powerful force, he created a huge pit in the ground. He leaped up, and knife lights appeared. Sun on East Sea Thousand Layers wave had knife lights which were like a wave with 1,000 layers and a sun rising into the sky. The knife skill was then retracted as the sword rays transformed into a huge brush which swept into the sky to draw a painting of a flood dragon, which soared into the sky and transformed into a long spear that was 12 yards long. Qin Mu grabbed onto the spear in mid-air and stabbed forward. The corners of village chief's eyes twitched furiously as he stared at Mute with an unpleasant gaze. Mute immediately retreated into his smithy and didn't dare to show his face. The spear vanished, replaced by countless sword lights which formed vast mountains and rivers. Sword-treading mountains and rivers. Qin Mu landed on the ground with surprise and delight. This sword pellet that Mute had forged was to his liking. He must have extracted the gold chi from the mysterious iron and mysterious gold, choosing chi and forgo the form. Even though this sword pellet was a sword pellet, it had a myriad of changes. His fist skills, spells, and sword skills could all be unleashed, and there was no obstruction at all. Mute's forging skills were already close to the path. Qin Mu kept the sword pellet, but he didn't use it to challenge village chief. Mute popped his head out and gave 2 signals, drawing a line across his head. What he meant was that this sword pellet could definitely get rid of village chief who was using the 5 elements realm. Village chief blew up and the wrinkles on his face twitched. If Qin Mu was to really use the sword pellet, the power of his sword skill would increase exponentially, and he might really be able to defeat him. Qin Mu shook his head. Grandpa Mute, village chief is not using a weapon, so I can't use one as well. Otherwise he won't accept that he lost. Mute rolled his eyes and gave him a "you are hopeless" look. Qin Mu continued to concentrate on comprehending and improving his sword-treading mountains and rivers. However, the result of each clash was the same. Every time he failed, he would have new comprehension which allowed him to perfect his sword-treading mountains and rivers more and more. However, he still failed after each improvement. Finally, after one more failure, Qin Mu discovered that he could no longer improve his move. With his current knowledge and experience, he could no longer upgrade his skill. He was stunned for a moment, then suddenly came to realization. He executed one of the moves of Sunset sword skills, Sunsets on Surging River, and his sword skill was like the surging river water that had a red sun half set in the heart of the river. From the red sun, countless sword lights would burst forth. He had only practiced this move once or twice, but the power he had unleashed was incomparably astonishing. It was like he had spent 100 years polishing this skill. Qin Mu was then convinced, and he knelt down in front of village chief to carry out the rites of taking him as his master. Village chief smiled. "Get up. There ain't so many rules. I shall teach you the other moves of sword picture in no time, and with your current attainment, it won't be hard for you to learn them. Mute, you rogue. You still have the face to come out and congratulate." Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 244. Wreck the country and ruin the people. Everyone from disabled elderly village came out to congratulate village chief for finally having a successor and Qin Mu for succeeding village chief's legacy, becoming the current human emperor. However, village chief wasn't pleased with Mute and Qin Mu wasn't really happy with being a human emperor. After the commotion, Qin Mu continued to learn sword skills from village chief. Sword picture was a set of sword skills founded by village chief and not the sword skills of Hall of Human Emperors. The first form, sword treading mountains and rivers, was the most complicated sword skill that Qin Mu had seen so far. It was even more complicated than the first form of Dao sword, yin yang come and go within 2 modes. However, sword treading mountains and rivers was the simplest sword skill in the set of sword picture. The second form, Sword of the Founding Emperor, was several times more complicated than sword treading mountains and rivers, and it was extremely difficult to master. When Qin Mu had first learned sword treading mountains and rivers, he had spent over a dozen days to do so. After experiencing Eternal Peace Empire, his horizons had broadened. He had also received teachings from Woodcutter's Rock and comprehended Unity Technique, which had then fused with Overlord Body 3 Elixir Technique. Because of all this, his aptitude and comprehension had improved quite a bit as well. However, learning Sword of the Founding Emperor still took him over 20 days. Only then did he understand Village Chief's intentions. If they hadn't competed with Sword treading mountains and rivers, he would have needed a much longer time to learn Sword of the Founding Emperor. He might have even taken a year and a half to master this move. Village Chief had squeezed his wisdom out so Qin Mu could learn Sword of the Founding Emperor in just over 20 days. Since he was already at half step to sword skill from sword technique, he could learn it even if it was strenuous. However, the third form, Calamity of the Founding Emperor, reached the extremes of technique and transformation which a sword skill could reach, so it was not something Qin Mu could master. He could memorize move, but if he wanted to execute it, he would have to comprehend the marvel of it first. But at that time, no matter how much he concentrated on comprehending, he couldn't understand the marvel of Calamity of the Founding Emperor completely. He was limited by the width of his horizons and knowledge. With narrow horizons and lack of knowledge, his foundation wasn't good enough, so even if Village Chief taught him, he wouldn't be able to learn or use the skill. Qin Mu could only drop his thoughts about mastering it and concentrate on Sword of the Founding Emperor. Sword of the Founding Emperor, Sea of Blood. Qin Mu had heard the young village chief chanting these phrases after walking out of Death's painting in a small and empty village in Eternal Peace Empire. At that time, he had sensed a strange emotion hidden within the sword skill. Sword treading mountains and rivers that village chief had taught him had an implicit charm and mood to it. It was the feeling of heroes gathering to slay gods and devils, while Sword of the Founding Emperor had the mood of commemorating martyrs. The two moods were different, not matching one another at all. Because of this, even though Qin Mu had learned the two sword forms, he still couldn't understand the different feelings behind them. The vital chi needed for Sword of the Founding Emperor was astonishing since one move had depleted almost half of his cultivation. If a person wanted to execute this move, it was impossible to do so without dense vital chi. Village Chief, how many moves are there in sword picture? Qin Mu asked. Village Chief said calmly, only 8 moves. Qin Mu was astonished. 8 moves? So few. 1 move in each realm. Village Chief narrowed his eyes. That's why there are only 8 moves. Qin Mu counted with his fingers. Spirit Embryo, 5 elements, 6 directions, 7 stars, celestial being, life and death, divine bridge. No matter how he counted, there were only 7 realms, so why were there 8 moves? A step above divine bridge realm is the level of gods. Could Village Chief's 8th move be the move of a god? His heart thumped violently. Other than comprehending sword skills these days, he competed with Village Chief and borrowed the pressure Village Chief exerted on him to improve himself. He was trying to incorporate Imperial Preceptor's 3 basic sword forms into Sword of the Founding Emperor. With an existence like Village Chief guiding him, he naturally improved by leaps and bounds. Village Chief's sword skills were close to the path and to him, so it didn't matter if there were 14 or 17 forms. However, to Qin Mu, adding Imperial Preceptor's 3 sword forms could increase the power of his move by quite a lot. As the days passed, his attainments in sword skills increased rapidly. Qin Mu seemed to have returned to the past. Training his fists with Old Ma daily, competing in knife skills with Butcher, stealing from each other with Cripple, learning to forge with Mute, cultivating his God's Eyes with Blind, refining medicine with Apothecary, painting with Deaf, and tailoring with Granny. Even though he went to bed exhausted every day, it was very fulfilling. After returning to disabled elderly village from his journey away, the things that Old Ma, Butcher, and the rest taught him were much more profound. In the past, they had only taught him entry-level techniques, but now that Qin Mu's horizons had broadened, they could teach him more profound abilities. Because of this, all the elders in disabled elderly village were very gratified. Granny's heart devil is acting up again. A commotion rose in the village, and Cripple called out in a loud voice, "Blind, come quickly! Granny C has recovered her true appearance, so I can't lay my hands on her. You can't see, so you shall deal with this little demoness." At the time, Qin Mu was competing knife skills with Butcher. When he looked over after hearing the commotion, he saw a woman walking out from Granny C's room. Upon seeing her, his heart throbbed uncontrollably a few times. He felt as if he had been ruthlessly struck by invisible arrows. Granny C had revealed her true appearance and even dressed herself up meticulously. The clothes on her body were no longer the old drabs she usually wore, but were tailored from exquisite silk. They fit her perfectly, showing off her good figure. Her makeup was also applied meticulously. With her bright eyes and white teeth, her face was lightly powdered and her astonishing beauty was on full display. She wore a bracelet on her left wrist that was made of green jade and pearl earrings that were shaped like tears hanging from her ears. When she walked out, the winter suddenly seemed to turn into spring and summer. Even though the weather was still freezing, everyone in the village felt the warmth of summer blossoming. She walked out like a goddess descending from paradise into the mortal world, stunning everyone in the village. Apothecary felt inferior and covered his face in shame to walk away. Deaf dropped his brush onto the table and hurriedly took out a bronze mirror to tidy himself. Mute ran to the water cauldron in a hurry to wash his face while Old Ma chanted the names of Buddha to suppress his heart devil. Butcher used his pig slaughtering knife to shave his favorite full beard while Cripple just shut his eyes and shouted for Blind to come over. Village Chief was also a little flustered and turned his head around to shout, "Blind! Blind!" Blind walked over towards Granny C with his bamboo cane and asked calmly, "Are you Cult Master Li or Granny C?" Cripple said angrily, "Of course she's Cult Master Li, that pervert. Granny C can't suppress him anymore. You can't see her true appearance, so you shall be the one to suppress Cult Master Li." A rough and old voice came from Granny C's mouth which smiled flirtatiously. "My wife is no longer a match for me, and now she's the one being suppressed. Look at me, aren't I beautiful?" She smiled very sweetly, obsessed with her own beauty. When she spoke next, her voice was still rough, but her tone was very gentle, and her breath smelled like irises and orchids. "When I married my wife, I realized that I was no fit for such a beauty like her. And it wasn't only me like that. None of the stinky men in this world were fit to be with her. However, I still decided to marry her, and I knew that she was willing to marry me since I was her master. She couldn't resist it. I knew she was preparing to kill me the night we would consummate our marriage, but I was willing to let her kill me. That was because—" She raised her wrist and examined her flawless white skin that was even whiter and more exquisite than fine white tallow jade. Even the flawless bracelet was serving merely as a prop, unfit to be on this wrist. Cult Master Li covered the mouth and giggled. "That was because I was too envious of her. I didn't want to marry her. I wanted to become her. After she killed me and I became her, wouldn't I gain the best of both worlds?" Blind walked over with his cane. Even though the woman before him was extremely beautiful, it didn't have any influence on Blind. He said unhurriedly, "Cult Master Li, you're too much. Have you forgotten that you once were a man? What is there to miss about being a stinky man?" Cult Master Li's body was charming when it rolled its eyes at him. "Damn it, Blind. Both your eyes and heart are blind. You don't know the benefits of being a woman at all. Don't block my way, you can't block me alone. I'm leaving. I shall live another lifetime as a woman." Qin Mu shut his eyes tightly to not look at the beauty, but he could resist opening his eyes almost right away. "Cult Master Li, you're getting a little sick in the mind. As a fellow cult master sacred teacher of Heavenly Saint Cult, I despise you as a human." Blind propped himself on his bamboo cane while smiling. "Well said, Muer." Cult Master Li shot a glance at Qin Mu, and Qin Mu instantly felt his mind turning blank. There were no more thoughts in his mind other than that the woman was really beautiful. "Talk some more and I'll kill you to become sacred cult master once again." Cult Master Li laughed while pinching the orchid-shaped fingers. Qin Mu's heart thumped violently. He felt that if such a beautiful woman wanted his life, he would be willing to give it to her. No, she's Granny C. It's Cult Master Li, a damned old man. It's not okay even if it was Granny C. She's the granny that raised me. Cold sweat rolled down Qin Mu's forehead as a heart devil was almost planted in his heart. He hurriedly shut his eyes. Cult Masterly walked towards the outskirts of the village, and the devil chi around the body grew heavier and heavier, the devil nature growing stronger and stronger. On the road in front of the woman stood a blind man with a bamboo cane. The two people made their moves almost at the same time. Among the sparks and flames, the outcome was decided in an instant. Energy surged forth in all directions, and numerous treasures that were lying all around the village were activated by the terrifying shockwave from the clash of the two people. A brilliant light shone as terrifying bursts of it scattered all the clouds in the sky. Cult Masterly grabbed his chest and collapsed. Blind, my wife's cultivation is too weak, or else I wouldn't be inferior to you. I'd certainly be stronger than you. Blind propped himself on his bamboo cane and said indifferently, "We had never exchanged blows before, so how do you know you'd be stronger than me?" Qin Mu rushed into Granny C's room and fetched a human skin and old clothes to cover Cult Masterly. The old man turned back into an old woman and screamed, "I don't want to be like this. I'm the most beautiful woman in the world. I don't want to be so ugly. I want to wear the most beautiful clothes and be the most beautiful woman." Old Ma hurried over and chanted the names of Buddha to suppress the devil nature, suppressing Cult Masterly entirely. After some time, Granny C regained her consciousness and thanked Old Ma. Apothecary immediately came forward to check on her injuries. After treating her, he said, "Blind, you're too harsh. Muer, you are faster than me in refining pills, so you shall refine the spirit pills." Qin Mu acknowledged and refined spirit pills right away. Blind sighed, "I had no choice but to be harsh. Granny C's cultivation is improving too fast. She's almost at life and death realm. Cult Master Li's primordial spirit must have fused well with her. Furthermore, Cult Master Li's unity technique is simply too strong." Granny C got up and consumed the spirit pills that Qin Mu had brought over. "I'm fine, much better now." Village Chief floated over and shook his head. "Granny, it's lucky that you were in the village. If you were outside and Cult Masterly took over your body, I'm afraid you would have wrecked the country and ruined the people. His devil nature is extremely strong, so it's quite normal that he would bring great turmoil to this world. Even the Emperor wouldn't be able to hold himself back, and the entire Eternal Peace Empire would be ruined at the hands of Cult Masterly." Old Ma said, "Your heart devil is becoming stronger and stronger, so dragging things out isn't an option any longer. My Buddhist skills aren't as profound as those of old Rulai, so maybe he could help you suppress Cult Masterly. Why don't you take a trip to Great Thunderclap Monastery?" Butcher touched his face and discovered blood all over his hands. He had shaved his beard too fast and cut his face with his pig slaughtering knife. However, at the time he had been too infatuated with Granny C's beauty, so he hadn't felt anything. Only when Granny C put on her old woman's skin once again did he come to realize what had happened and said in a hurry, "There's no time to lose. It's best if Granny sets off now. The longer you delay, the more danger we'll be in." Village Chief coughed lightly, then said, "We will be going to Great Thunderclap Monastery to ask old Rulai to suppress Granny's devil nature and not to eradicate that place, so there's no need for too many people. Old Ma knows the way there, so he must go. And Blind can ignore Granny's appearance, so he needs to go as well."
Moore is clever and has cultivated heavenly devil creation technique, so he can also help out, and he's proficient in the art of healing as well. "You three shall accompany Granny to Great Thunderclap Monastery." His expression was grim when he said solemnly, "Remember, never let Cult Masterly run away, or else the world will be in utter chaos."
Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 245. Sea Suppression Heavenly King. Qin Mu, Old Ma, and Blind nodded in agreement. Even though Granny C was beautiful, she wouldn't use her beauty as a weapon. On the contrary, she knew her beauty was too deadly and took the initiative to cover up, dressing up ugly when meeting people. However, Cult Master Li was different. The heart of Heavenly Devil Cult's previous cult master was twisted. He loved Granny C too much and was envious of her beauty, which was why he wanted to become her. Furthermore, he had a different comprehension of great educational Heavenly Devil scriptures than Qin Mu. Even though Qin Mu had also received the same book, the same teachings from Woodcutter's Rock, and comprehended the same unity technique. He was influenced by everyone in the village since he was young. Even though his actions might be slightly recalcitrant, he still stood upright. Qin Mu's unity technique had Overlord Body 3 elixir technique as a foundation, which was very orthodox. Many spells and divine arts that many people viewed as from the devil path were executed righteously by him. Cult Master Li's unity technique was, however, pretty evil and had the impression of the devil path. Cult Master Li would also not let herself suffer from grievances by dressing ugly to meet people. On the contrary, she would flaunt her beauty and cause devastation to all living beings. The old cult master didn't care at all about the so-called overturning a city with a smile and overturning a country with another. Qin Mu went back into Granny C's room and fetched all the beast skins that she had collected. He put them in his Taotai sack, preparing for emergencies. Old Ma and Blind also packed their luggage. Blind's luggage was simple: a bamboo cane and a copper 8 divinatory symbol hanging from a fortune-telling banner. Old Ma, on the other hand, brought the memorial tablets of his wife and children. After kissing them, he placed them safely in his bundle. He wore a green Buddhist robe and looked like a traveling monk that had gone through great hardships. Granny C's Tao heart was still slightly unstable at times, acting up frequently. Old Ma could help her suppress Cult Master Li while Blind was there in case the suppression wasn't enough. He will then injure Cult Master Li, and Qin Mu would be in charge of treating the old woman. They walked out of the village, and Granny C laughed at herself. I still need you guys to protect me, and even Muir has to help. However, with me being the previous saintess of the devil cult and old Rulai being the Buddha, will he lend a helping hand? Old Ma didn't show any emotions on his face. Old Rulai will help you. Cult Master Li is the previous cult master of Heavenly Devil Cult and is of the same seniority as Old Rulai. Old Rulai will gain merit from subduing devils, and subduing a great devil such as Cult Master Li can aid him in his cultivation. Furthermore, Buddhas giving up their lives to rear devils is a common event. Qin Mu said worriedly, I'm afraid that when they subdue Cult Master Li, they will subdue Granny as well. Old Rulai won't do so. Old Ma shook his head. He has his own principles and they are his path, his practices. Upon reaching a cultivation like his, he doesn't even have to keep his practices in mind. His actions will never step over his practice. That is what practice is. Qin Mu couldn't help being curious. Old Ma had such a deep grudge against Old Rulai, but from his words, he still held great respect for Old Rulai. This was not merely because Old Rulai was once Old Ma's master. There had to be something about that old monk that made people respect him. What I'm doubting is Old Rulai's ability. Blind raised his head. Does Old Rulai have the ability to suppress Cult Master Li? This old devil was once an existence on par with him. No one said anything after this. Among the 3 sacred grounds of the martial world, there was Tao Sect, Great Thunderclap Monastery, and Heavenly Devil Cult. As the previous cult master of Heavenly Devil Cult, Cult Master Li was a top figure in the martial world and on par with Old Rulai. If Old Rulai wanted to refine him, it would be quite difficult. Great Thunderclap Monastery lies at the borders of Great Ruins and Eternal Peace Empire, Old Ma said. Legend says that God Broken Mountain Range was the mountain range sliced apart by a god, creating a natural chasm between Great Ruins and Eternal Peace. Great Thunderclap Monastery has a similar legend, but it has something extra. When the god slashed and his attack came near Mount Meru, there were monks sitting on the mountain. They filled the entire mountain and pledged to die and live with Mount Meru. The gods saw their sincerity and took a detour around Mount Meru. All other mountain ranges were sliced apart, with only Mount Meru saved from damage. Blind smiled. I feel that there was someone above Mount Meru, or else the god wouldn't have cared one whit about the lives of the monks on the mountain. Mount Meru lay at the border of Great Ruins and Eternal Peace Empire. One side was to the Empire and the other to Great Ruins. The sacred mountain was quite a distance away from Eternal Border and Secret Waters. It was, however, not very far from Qingmen Pass of the northern borders. It was only a journey of 4,000 to 5,000 miles. The distance from disabled elderly village to Mount Meru was 30,000 miles. Qin Mu was much slower than Granny C, Old Ma, and Blind, so they had to take 6 to 7 days to reach there. The nights at Great Ruins were extremely dangerous, so they could only hurry throughout the day, because of which they took a bit longer than they would have done elsewhere. If they flew through the air, they could reach the place in 2 days, but Qin Mu's cultivation wasn't high enough for that. They would have to stop to rest and recover his vital qi after every 100 miles if he ran at full strength, so it was better to travel on land instead. Qin Mu brought the dragon Qilin as a mode of transport. The dragon Qilin could barely match the speed of Old Ma and the rest, so they didn't have to slow down because of him. When first evening came, they reached an ancient temple which was desolate and uninhabited. There were some strange beasts inside, but they ignored them, continuing to lie lazily beside a statue of the Heavenly King. Mu'er, come and pay your respect. Blind took out a few sticks of incense and waved for Qin Mu to come over. The two people, one young and one old, immediately to the front of the Heavenly King's statue and stabbed a couple sticks of incense in the broken censer before taking 3 steps back. They then prayed in one voice. This little one is from disabled elderly village which is located near the river. I have come across your temple and would like to rest my legs here for the time being. If I have alarmed the owner of this land, I am deeply sorry. Since he was young, this little one had weak kidneys and a frail body. My primordial yang has long since dispersed. Ugh! Granny C groaned. In anger, she then added, Blind, you have taught Mu'er bad. Blind laughed. Granny C, you might not be afraid of being plucked, but we are. If you don't believe, you can ask Mu'er if the prayers I taught him worked. Qin Mu nodded repeatedly. They work. When Xian Qinger heard my prayers, she didn't pluck me. Granny C didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She called Mu'er over. Come and help me cook. After Qin Mu walked over, she said secretly, Blind is full of bad ideas. Don't always learn from him. When night descended, the surroundings of the Heavenly King's temple were very silent. There was no sound around, besides the dragon Qilin's snores. Old Ma sat upright like a Buddha, while Blind leaned on his bamboo cane as he sat against a wall, his head lowered in sleep. Unlike them, Qin Mu had used dried grass to prepare 2 beds, and Granny C slept beside him. In the dead of the night, the beating of gongs and drums suddenly resounded from outside. Everyone in the temple immediately became alert, and Qin Mu sat up to look around, but only saw darkness. The candles in the temple were still giving off a dim light, but the beatings of gongs and drums were very clear, coming closer and closer. Blind and Old Ma immediately came to Qin Mu and Granny C's side, and Old Ma motioned them to stay quiet. The beating of gongs and drums grew closer and closer until they came to the front of the temple. A few deep voices then called out, Silence! Challenge! A couple of god statues came walking into the temple while wearing worn-out armor. Even though the stone statues were dilapidated, they were like living gods, and Qin Mu even smelled the stench of rot from them. These stone statues were majestic, and the 100 white skeletons behind them were soldiers holding onto broken weapons, lining up in a perfect manner. A few of the soldiers held gongs and drums in their bony hands, while a few others were carrying banners with words silence and challenge. The stone statues walked into the temple while the white skeletons remained outside. Qin Mu stared wide-eyed at such an absurd scene in front of him. The dragon Qilin had also woken up and was yawning. A human voice actually came from a god statue which said to the Heavenly King's god statue in the temple, reporting to Sea Suppression Heavenly King, East Sea Dragon King Ao Zhan is using the natural disaster to rebel. His Majesty sent me orders from Carefree Village to come forth and assist Sea Suppression Heavenly King to slay the rebel. The dragon Qilin was lying under the feet of the Heavenly King's god statue, but he was still in a daze and didn't know what was happening. At that moment, the tall and sturdy Heavenly King's god statue moved. The 8 flags behind it fluttered, and the stone statue trembled before standing up. With an abnormal awe-inspiring authority, it shouted out, For 20,000 years has this disaster plagued us, and this fellow still dares to rebel. Bring me my sword. The resounding sound of a sword coming out of its sheath came from the back of the Heavenly King's temple. A green dragon crescent blade that was 30 yards long broke out from the dirt behind the temple and came whooshing over. The heavenly king's god statue grabbed onto the blade with his hand, and the sword hummed. "Where's my steed?" that heavenly king's god statue shouted. The dragon Qin finally came to his senses when he suddenly felt himself sinking down as the heavenly king's god statue sat down on him. The dragon's body rose uncontrollably and flew out of the temple. The dragon Qin was indescribably appalled when it heard the booming voice of the heavenly king's god statue coming from his back. "You guys shall stay to guard this place. I'll return after I've slain him." After the orders were said, the dragon Qin turned into a trail of flames against his will and disappeared into the darkness while carrying the heavenly king's god statue. Instead of saying he was carrying that god statue, it could be said that the heavenly king's god statue was bringing him along, as he absolutely couldn't carry the heavenly king's god statue. In the temple, Qin Mu, Granny C, Blind, and Old Ma were dumbfounded, unable to speak a word for quite a while. Later, they looked at one another in dismay. It was hard to say how much time had passed, but they reckoned that dawn was already coming. At that moment, a dragon's roar rang in the air. There was a huge crash, and a dragon's head fell down from the pitch-black night sky, tumbling 2 rounds in the courtyard of the heavenly king's temple. Qin Mu immediately looked over, but this dragon's head was sculpted from stone and not a real dragon's head. The roars of dragons rang endlessly as the heavenly king's god statue flew back while riding on the dragon Qin. He jumped off and sat down on the lotus platform in the temple. After placing his green dragon crescent blade by his side, he said, "You guys can report back to His Majesty that by good luck this general was able to accomplish the mission and severed the head of the rebel." Once the stone statues received their orders, they turned around to enter the darkness, bringing with them the army of white skeletons. As they disappeared into the darkness, the beating the gongs and drums also gradually faded away. Some time later, the crowing of roosters could be heard, and the darkness retreated into the distance. The sun rose into the sky and shone into the heavenly king's temple. Qin Mu shook his head. This night had been like an extremely weird dream. He looked at the dragon Qin, who was still in a daze, and asked immediately, "Fatty dragon, how are you?" "I had a dream," the muddle-headed dragon Qin said. "I dreamed that I carried a god king that gave off glorious flames. We slaughtered our way into a battlefield over a roaring sea as countless divine dragons attacked me. However, they were all slain by the blade of that god king on my back. I carried him into the sea, and we slaughtered our way through a bunch of dragon gods and severed the head of one of the dragon kings, then left after taking his head. This dream was so real." Qin Mu looked at Blind and Old Ma before asking softly, "Grandpa Blind, do you think what happened yesterday night was real?" Blind and Old Ma shook their heads. "Who can be sure about the incidents in Great Ruins? Let us hurry on our way. Heading to Great Thunderclap Monastery is more important." Qin Mu stared at the heavenly king's god statue in a daze, feeling something abnormal about everything here. He went forward and stretched his hand out to touch the stone statue, but it was ice cold and not made of flesh and blood. His Majesty sent his orders from Carefree Village. His orders from Carefree Village. Qin Mu had a complicated expression as he muttered to himself. Where exactly is Carefree Village? Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 246. Seemed real yet resembled fantasy. Qin Mu looked at that green dragon crescent blade in the hands of the Heaven King's god statue and noticed that this blade was real and not made of stone. When they had just come into the temple, Qin Mu had surveyed his surroundings. He clearly remembered that there was no blade in the hands of the Heavenly King's god statue, let alone such a huge one as Green Dragon Crescent Blade. What was even more astonishing, the blade actually had some blood stains. When Qin Mu stretched his hand out to check if it was really fresh blood, Blind's cane lifted his wrist up, moving it to the side. With a bright smile on his face, Blind said, "Muer, don't be so curious, you'll die." Qin Mu was frightened and suddenly remembered what he and village chief had encountered when walking in the darkness. A droplet of devil blood had caused all the plants within a radius of 100 yards to wither instantly. If it was real blood on the Green Dragon Crescent Blade, then the weird things that had happened last night would have also been real. This would mean that the Heavenly King's god statue had really slain East Sea Dragon King, and it would be his blood on the blade. Blind seemed to know Qin Mu's thoughts and said softly, "Divine blades are psychic. Don't provoke them recklessly." Qin Mu smiled. "I'm not Grandpa Cripple and won't commit such an outrageous act like stealing the divine blade of the Heavenly King. I only want to take the blood on the blade. This is the blood of the Dragon King of Divine Dragons, so it can probably be used to refine medicine." Blind praised. Muir is still the thrifty one in the household, knowing how to accumulate wealth. Qin Mu took out a jade bottle and carefully took that drop of Dragon King's blood on the green dragon crescent blade into his bottle, then screwed it tightly shut. In the courtyard of the Heavenly King's temple, a huge dragon's head made out of stone had created a huge pit in the ground. On the shattered pieces, there were some bloodstains which shone bright red. Qin Mu fetched a box and transformed his vital qi tread into sword qi. He then carefully controlled it to scrape the bloodstains into the box. When he came to the neck of the dragon's head, he saw that it had been cleanly cut off. It looked like it had been separated from its body by an incredibly sharp knife. From the cross-section, Qin Mu could imagine how overbearing and quick that sharp knife had been. Even though the dragon's head was from a stone statue, he could still feel the abundant and matchless desire within the knife, its realm. If I sat here and observed this section of the dragon's head, I could comprehend an extremely overbearing knife skill that wouldn't be inferior to Grandpa Butcher's pig-slaughtering knife skill. However, there's no time, we should be hurrying. Qin Mu felt that it was a pity. If he could comprehend the god realm contained in this knife skill, knife desire, and knife realm, just the aura alone could scare a bunch of people to death. Old Ma hurried him. "Muir, it's time to go." Qin Mu caught up with the others and called the dragon Qilin over to get on him. The dragon Qilin had been used like a steed by the Heavenly King the whole night, so its body was weak and aching all over. The moment Qin Mu jumped onto him, he squealed like a pig being slaughtered. Qin Mu immediately jumped off, and the dragon Qilin said, "I must have been possessed, having been ridden by a stone statue the entire night. Elder Blind, you know fortune-telling, so can you do exorcism as well?" Blind shook his head. "I'm not a professional in this field. I only do fortune-telling and exorcisms once in a while. I can't exorcise you, but you don't have to worry, you'll be better after resting for a night." The dragon Qilin was only half convinced. After walking a few thousand miles north, the terrain became lower. Qin Mu turned his head back and saw that they had walked down from a few mountain ranges, which left him bewildered. Granny C said, "This place is like a basin, so it looks like there are huge mountains all around it. But in truth, out there are the plains from which we entered. This basic is actually quite large." Everyone looked around, checking out the majestic mountains, thick forests, ravines, and chasms all over the basin. The geography here was quite different from the places in Great Ruins. This basin was extremely vast, and when Qin Mu and the rest had walked past a foothill, they could see some red corals branching out. They were very mesmerizing, like rubies. Granny C plucked a red coral, planning to make it into a hairpin when a strange beast suddenly jumped out at them. It looked like a huge lobster, but its body was 3 yards long and had 8 legs as well as pincers that it kept swinging at everyone. Lunch is settled. Blind was elated. During lunch, Qin Mu roasted the strange beast, and its fragrance assaulted their nostrils. Grease flowed out from golden yellow tamale, which heightened everyone's appetite. Old Ma had fasted for a long time, so this time he also ate to his heart's content, leaving only the lobster's shell on the ground. Qin Mu was bewildered. Why was this type of strange beast here? There is no water around here. As he was saying that, the mooing of cows came from the distance, and the forest shook. A couple fish monsters had smelled the fragrance and walked out of the forest. They had fish-like upper bodies that were 20 yards long, while their lower half had 6 sturdy legs. This group of strange beasts then mooed like cows. Qin Mu looked over in the direction of the noise and saw the fish monsters sprinting as if they were flying. Their legs seemed to have evolved from their fins and had huge scales which were incomparably hard. When they walked, The thousands of scales were like mirrors which reflected the sunlight that was shining on them. There's no need for unnecessary killing once we filled our stomachs. Old Ma released his aura and scared the fish monsters away. His aura was astonishing. It not only scared away the cow-like fish monsters, but also the birds in the forest. When Qin Mu raised his head, he saw a swarm of fish that had grown wings flying into the distance. He opened his green heaven's eyes to have a look and saw black figures moving around on the mountain peaks far away. A couple huge octopi with 8 tentacles shrunk their huge heads and retreated into their own territory, not daring to provoke them. One of the octopus was startled enough to spew out a puff of black smoke which shrouded an area of 7 hectares, turning the air there pitch black. The 4 people then continued on their way and met a few fishmen who had fish heads and human bodies and were holding onto pitchforks for hunting. "What a strange place," Blind muttered. Qin Mu had lived in great ruins ever since he was young. He had seen such strange living beings since he was young, so he thought that fish and prawns should be like this, running around everywhere. At first, he had been surprised a bit, but he didn't put it to heart. However, Blind and Granny C hadn't always lived around here, so they knew what fish and prawns were like outside, so they found it strange. Granny C looked around and muttered, "This place should have been a huge sea that had magical creations." Once the sea disappeared, the living beings in it could only move onto the dry land and change their habits and abilities. However, aren't these changes a little too much? Blind also felt that it was outrageous, but the dragon Qilin was the first to speak. He suddenly said, "I seem to have come here before." Qin Mu was bewildered, but he still smiled. "You and Patriarch came here before." Dragon Qilin shook his head. "No. What I meant was that the god had ridden me here last night. In time, they saw a village full of the abandoned people of great ruins. They all looked as if they didn't know what to do next." Qin Mu went forward to inquire about it, and an elder said, "Countless dragon king temples in the radius of hundreds of miles were destroyed last night. Many of the dragon kings that were worshipped in the temples actually had their heads cut off. We usually go to the dragon king's temples to give our offerings and pray for good weather. But now that they've been destroyed, everyone is at a loss." Qin Mu was greatly shocked and immediately asked for more details. "Yesterday, the storm was heavy and everyone in the village was rudely awoken. When we went outside, we saw that it was pitch black, and there was water above everyone's houses. That water just floated above, however, not landing down." Qin Mu was stunned. Water floating above the roofs? The sound of waves was very loud, and there was light coming from the water above. Many people even saw dragons. It was like a huge sea was hanging in the sky, with slaughter happening within it. I saw bolts of lightning streaking through all the time, only stopping when dawn came. After daybreak, the water in the sky vanished. Only the trees looked like they had been rained on the whole night, the tree crowns filled with water. We then discovered that quite a number of temples had been destroyed, and the people that live in the temples said that they saw the stone statues of the divine dragons flying out. Qin Mu stared with wide eyes. Stone statues of divine dragons flying out? A monk that lives in Divine Dragon Valley says that he saw a heavenly king carrying a blade and riding a plump monster. He barged in and slew the Divine Dragon King in Divine Dragon Valley, leaving with the head. After Qin Mu finished scouting out the information, he came back to tell Blind, Old Ma, and Granny C. All of them looked at one another in dismay. This incident was really too weird. What happened yesterday night seemed real yet resembled fantasy. Stone statues handing down decrees in the darkness, Heavenly King's god statue wielding a blade to kill dragons kings, and the dragon Qilin being a steed for the entire night. The abandoned people of great ruins even talked about a sea hanging in the sky and the heads of the dragon kings and dragon god being severed. If one linked these incidents together, then what happened last night had to be real. That stone statue that handed out the decree last night said His Majesty had sent his decree from Carefree Village. The main problem lies here, an ancient voice said from Granny C's mouth. I think. Amitba. Old Ma transformed into a huge Buddha to suppress Granny C's heart. On the other side, Blind made a move to bind Granny C in place. The two of them were nervous, but in the end they suppressed the devil nature of Granny C. Qin Mu also wiped away his cold sweat and hurried them. Let's go, let's go. We should reach Great Thunderclap Monastery as soon as possible to prevent Cult Master Li from coming out to create havoc. As they hurried forward, they soon saw Divine Dragon Valley. There were countless sculptures of divine dragons that were surrounding a huge lake, and in the center of it was a sculpture of a dragon king. Many of the divine dragon statues had collapsed, and all of them seemed to have been severed by a single strike, from which they tumbled down to the ground. The divine dragon king's sculpture in the center of the lake also stood with a severed neck, but its head was nowhere to be seen. My God! Granny C gradually woke up and moaned when she saw this sight. This part of Great Ruins is so mysterious. Are these stone statues just god statues, or have they transformed living gods? I really don't understand. Amitba. Buddha rays shone brightly around old Ma, and a white-robed monk flew out from the heart of his brows and entered the heart of Granny C's brows in a flash, suppressing her. With a grim face, old Ma said, "No time to delay. I won't be able to suppress him for much longer." Cult Master Li's primordial spirit is fusing at an incredible speed with Granny C, and her cultivation has already broken through to life and death realm. If we delay any longer, I'm afraid it won't be long before they will fuse completely, and Cult Master Li will be able to finally take over the nest and become the owner of this body. Blind asked solemnly, "How long can you suppress him for?" Old Ma shook his head. "I can still suppress him for now, but I might injure Granny's mind if I exert too much force." Blind said resolutely, "Hurry!" Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 247. 20 Heavens. Qin Mu, Old Ma, and the rest increased their speed, but Old Ma had to suppress Granny C's heart, so it was becoming increasingly more tiring for him, which in turn slowed them down. Cult Master Li was growing rapidly, and Granny C's cultivation was becoming stronger and stronger. However, Old Ma didn't dare to exert his full force in fear of harming Granny C's mind. Because of this, their journey had quite a lot of unstable variables. Granny C was waking up less and less, while Cult Master Li was waking up more and more. Qin Mu was burning with anxiety, but he was helpless. This basin had originally been a sea and was probably the East Sea which the Heavenly King's God statue had mentioned. The terrain here was incomparably complicated, with the ravines and chasms being thousands of yards deep and the mountain ranges being as sharp as blades. The East Sea had lost its seawater and turned into normal land. Qin Mu felt that there was something strange about this when he listened to the villagers about the sea in the sky last night, but the seawater had disappeared when day came. Yet where had it went? The farther they went, the stranger and stronger the living beings became. There were even glowing jellyfish flying in the sky which hid in the temples when night descended. At that time they were like colorful lanterns. On their way, the group even met living flood dragons. Some of them lived in deep mountain streams while others lived in volcanoes, ruling over their territories. As long as they weren't provoked, these flood dragons rarely left their caves. A couple times Qin Mu saw them flying out to catch humans to eat, but whenever they passed by their group, the flood dragons could see that they were very strong and didn't dare to be impudent and just flew past them. After walking out of this basin, Mount Meru was only 2 days away. During them, Qin Mu and the rest didn't dare to relax even when they were sleeping, always ready to suppress Cult Master Li, which was really tiring for them. Only the dragon Qilin had enough sleep and was well fed, so his skin, scales, and fur were all bright and glossy. Qin Mu and the rest simply jumped on the dragon Qilin's back and let this behemoth carry them to Mount Meru. Gradually, more and more villages they passed believed in Buddhism. Every household worshipped a statue of Buddha, while some even placed a Buddha statue among the stone statues in the village, worshipping God and Buddha together. Qin Mu inquired about this and found out that some monks had come forth to preach and cured the sickness of the villagers, so they had won their hearts. Buddhism seems to have followers in Great Ruins as well. Blind smiled. By saving the abandoned people of Great Ruins, Great Thunderclap Monastery do treat all living things equally, but isn't it really an opportune shortcut, borrowing the reputation of the stone statues to accumulate merit? The closer they got to Great Thunderclap Monastery, the more Buddhist temples were around. Some of these temples had flourishing incense burning in front of them and worshipped Buddha statues of different forms. However, when it came to nighttime, the people and strange beasts of great ruins wouldn't hide in these Buddhist temples but would come to places that had stone statues and god statues. Qin Mu thought to himself, Old Rulai has put in much effort, but it's hard to compete against the gods of great ruins. Buddhism can cure sickness, but it can't save lives from the darkness. The mountains nearby gradually grew larger, and there were monasteries of all sizes standing on it in numbers. Qin Mu passed by a few of them and decided to stay in one since the sky was getting dark. There was a lot of incense burning in front of that monastery, and a couple hundred monks in it didn't seem afraid of the night. They still continued to chant their Buddhist scriptures. Could these monks have great divine arts that are able to defend against the darkness? Qin Mu thought with astonishment. To his surprise, most of the Buddha statues gave off a faint divine light which blocked the darkness away. Qin Mu went to the front of one of them, and his face turned black. The monks in this monastery had actually plastered a layer of pottery clay on the stone statues of great ruins and baked the clay into the appearance of Buddha. They then pasted golden leaves on the outside and disguised the god statues as golden Buddhas. When night fell and the stone statues shielded the place from the darkness, it would look like the Buddha statues were exhibiting their Buddha might to protect all living things. When Qin Mu used his third eye, he saw that the gods who were protecting great ruins were giving off divine rays of 10,000 fathoms, not any Buddha statue. There were also some fierce and abnormal strange beasts that never left the temples even in the morning. The monks were used to this sight, and the strange beasts were not tied up, but were free to roam around the monastery. What was the most astonishing was that the carnivorous strange beasts in the monastery were well behaved and seemed to have become vegetarian, which was different from their fierce nature. They also prayed to Buddha. Some people of great ruins who sought shelter here said it was the power of Buddhism. However, Qin Mu saw monks secretly feeding the strange beasts large chunks of meat which had the smell of anesthetic. Qin Mu was astonished, and a frown came onto his face. Muer, don't bother too much, Blind said softly. Great Thunderclap Monastery is close, so if we smash this monastery, Great Thunderclap Monastery will receive news about it and give us trouble. They might not save Granny C then. Hypocrites, Granny C sneered. This is the hypocrisy of Buddhism. They clearly have no great divine art of their own, so they took one from other people and call it their own, bragging that it's the power of Buddhism. Blind, Old Ma, you guys are hypocrites as well. You require Old Rulai's help, so you don't dare to expose the act of these bald donkeys. Qin Mu said, whether they have great divine arts or not, won't Cult Masterly know when we reach Great Thunderclap Monastery and meet Old Rulai? Granny C chuckled. Cult Master Qin, you are worthy to be the sacred cult master of our sacred cult. You are the cult master of Heavenly Saint Cult, yet you have to beg Old Rulai of the enemy sect to help you. You're a disgrace to the reputation of our Heavenly Saint Cult. The awe-inspiring authority of our Heavenly Saint Cult is going to be spoiled by you. When I recover completely and return to the sacred cult once more, I'll reorganize it and show you what the sacred cult master should be doing. Qin Mu remained unmoved and asked, what should the sacred cult master do? Tear down the facade of these bald donkeys, smashing their Buddha statues and revealing the god statues behind them, Granny C stated. Remove the anesthetics from the strange beasts and let them eat humans, so their true nature can be revealed and they will massacre all the bald donkeys here, cleaning out the entire monastery. Let the foolish people see all the bullshit. Buddhism looks impressive, but it's worthless. The so-called righteous path is actually dog's hit. So bring that dog shit into the light. Don't let them wrap their clay idols with a layer of gold. These are the teachings of our Heavenly Saint Cult, to have a pure understanding of nature. Qin Mu felt that the words were very logical, but the actions were too extreme. He also wanted to undo the anesthetics in the strange beasts' bodies, but after thinking that they would eat humans after regaining their senses, he could only drop the thought. Finally, Great Thunderclap Monastery was in sight, and they could see a majestic mountain standing tall in the center of God-broken mountain range. The other mountain ranges were all sliced apart by a mighty force that had formed sheer cliffs and precipitous rock faces that were hard to cross even for birds. All the mountains were blanketed by snow, but this one, it alone stood surrounded by others, protected in their center. It was weird to say it, but it looked like the mountain peaks formed stairs. 3,000 mountain peaks formed a circle which was the lowest layer of stairs. The second layer had 999 mountain peaks, and was followed by 99 mountain peaks and 9 mountain peaks. One layer was higher than the other layer, and they all surrounded the main peak in the middle. Monasteries of all sizes stood in number among the mountain peaks, and they were all worshipping majestic Buddha statues. Some mountain peaks were sculpted into a huge Buddha. Some monasteries were built on the Buddha's palm, while others in the heart. Really luxurious in style, Blind praised. Old Ma, why do you Buddhists like to wear gold and silver? Such glorious splendor, such luxury. Wouldn't it be better used for disaster relief? To monks, the 4 elements are vanity, but the pockets can never be empty. Old Ma said indifferently, who would worship and give offerings if we weren't luxurious? Granny C sneered. Hypocrite. Qin Mu shouted. Shut up. Old Rulai will refine you to death later. Rascal, you even dare to scold me. Granny C became furious. Qin Mu was flustered and muttered, oh, it's Granny. Granny, don't take it to heart. I thought it was Cult Master Li who had run out again. Granny C sneered. Old Ma, I'm not saying you're one, but these bald donkeys are clearly hypocrites. Take a look around. See which monastery isn't grand and luxurious, indulging in a life of pleasure? Which Buddha statue isn't wearing silver or gold? Among all the monasteries, only those of bald donkeys are this luxurious. These monks don't do anything productive, don't pay taxes, and complain when their benefits are being touched. In the meantime, they nurture their monk weapons, rebel, and want to control the general situation in this world. Shut up, demon! Someone shouted from midair, and Qin Mu raised his head to see a monk with Buddha rays above them. He looked dignified, but it was obvious that he was furious after hearing Granny C's words. That monk then saw Old Ma. There was astonishment on his face for a moment, then he ran away while shouting, This is bad. This is bad. Ma Wangshan is coming back up the mountain. In the monasteries on the mountain peaks, all the monks went into an uproar and flew up to form a formation in midair as if they were facing a great enemy. Ma Wangshan said indifferently, When I came back to retrieve my arm before, I created a small commotion. Let us go up the mountain. Fire clouds grew under the dragon Chilinsal's as he sprinted towards the main peak in the center. That place was above the sea of clouds, so sunlight could shine on it, basking it in brilliant gold, which was why it was called the Golden Peak. If they wanted to fly up to it, it would take some time even for the dragon Qilin. On their journey, they passed by thousands of temples and monasteries, and most of them were filled with senior monks that had attainments in their cultivation and possessed remarkable abilities. None of them dared to come forward to stop them, but they weren't resigned to just let them barge into the golden peak of Mount Meru without any opposition. More and more monks flew out while riding all kinds of strange beasts and surrounded the golden peak in a formation. There were layers and layers of monks densely packed together to subdue demons and devils. Qin Mu couldn't help admiring Old Ma. The last time Grandpa Ma came here, he must have fought his way up and barged straight into the main peak. Old Ma made the dragon Qilin stop in front of the tens of thousands of monks forming an impenetrable defense to protect the golden peak. He said, I'm here to see Old Rulai. I have a request to make. His voice vibrated, and various visions instantly filled the mountains. Golden springs erupted from the ground. A lotus descended from the sky. The apparitions of 8 races of demigods and semi-devils appeared high above, as well as those of gods of the 20 heavens. The events repeated themselves with magnificent rays shining in all directions as they recited the many names of Buddha in unison. This mastery of incantation dominated countless monks. At this moment, an old voice laughed from the golden peak. Ma Wangshan's cultivation has improved since back in the day. I'm guessing you must have cultivated to the 20th heaven of Rulai's Mahayana Sutra, Brahma realm. Another step further and you'll be a Rulai. Monks, you may retreat and let him come up. I've been waiting a long time for him. 20 heavens? Qin Mu was slightly stunned and looked towards old Ma. The impenetrable defense formed by the monks in front of them dispersed, and old Ma let the dragon Qilin go up the mountain while saying, "They are 20 realms in Rulai's Mahayana Sutra. Once a person cultivates all 20 realms of heavens, they will become a Rulai. When I left Great Thunderclap Monastery back then, I had already cultivated to the 19th realm, Sakra realm. At that time, I was already a first-class practitioner in the world." Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 248. Returning to the normal life. If one cultivates all 20 realms, they will become Rulai? Qin Mu's eyes lit up. Great Thunderclap Monastery was no doubt the greatest sacred grounds of Buddhism. Rulai's Mahayana Sutra also deserved to be a sex legacy ultimate art which was on par with great educational heavenly devil scriptures and 14 writings of Tao sword. The 3 biggest sacred grounds were indeed not for show. Now that Eternal Peace Empire was having a snow disaster, the 4 seasons here were like summer. Many immigrants from Eternal Peace Empire had escaped to this place and stayed in the monasteries, many of them converting to Buddhism. Qin Mu looked at the monasteries on the mountain peaks and said softly, "What Great Thunderclap Monastery is doing seems to be taking advantage of people when they're down." Blind shook his head. "Mu'er, no matter what their intentions are, you have to look at what they are doing. Great Thunderclap Monastery has saved the lives of these people, and that is a good deed. No matter if they are using this act to promote the teachings of Buddhism, what they are doing is good. If you only magnify Great Thunderclap Monastery's intentions and don't look at what else is being achieved, you won't be any different from Cult Master Li." Qin Mu was astonished and nodded in acknowledgement. One's life was nothing more than a cultivation path, and it was easy to be led astray by an extreme way of thinking. Anyone who didn't have a mature reflection and unmovable thoughts would easily be led astray by their own heart. Being with Cult Master Li these few days, Qin Mu had been influenced by him without even noticing it. The previous cult master of Heavenly Devil Cult had a devil nature and his mentality was of the extreme kind. However, he was a grandmaster and his words were very logical, so any incautiousness would end up with a person subconsciously absorbing his philosophy and way of thinking. The dragon Qilin came to the golden peak, and the fire clouds under his feet grew smaller as he descended onto the ground. The golden peak stemmed out from the clouds which were the same color as the white jade laid down on the ground. This place was like a paradise. Qin Mu looked around and exclaimed in admiration. Roland's golden palace was luxurious and had the feeling of a nouveau riche. Great Thunderclap Monastery was also luxurious, but they were much more solemn and everywhere was the dignity and culture of Buddhism. On the golden peak, pagodas stood in numbers, and one of them was especially grand. Monks with long eyebrows sat there as well as on the eaves of the pagoda, reciting scriptures continuously with their reverberating Buddha voice. Could this be the 1,000 Buddhas pagoda? Qin Mu thought to himself. A female bodhisattva in white who was carrying a white vase came forward and bowed. "Heavenly Devil Cult Master, Ma Wangshan, Madam C, and this old Tao friend, Rulai is already waiting for you. Please follow me." Qin Mu said, "Thanks for the trouble, big sister." "Big sister?" The female bodhisattva laughed. "Cult Master Qin is joking. Please." Qin Mu and the rest followed after her. On the golden peak, the Buddha rays around the eminent monks shone brilliantly as they sat on the clouds. The golden rays behind them formed circular shapes that were very dazzling. Old Rulai as the leader of all the monks sat on the highest point. His corporeal body was vast and beside him were left and right venerables. Sitting below were various bodhisattva, arhats, vajras, guardians, and some of old Rulai's disciples who had extremely strong cultivations. There were even some monks with attainments in Tao that seemed to belong to a different race. They didn't look human. Qin Mu and the rest came closer, and Qin Mu greeted, "Senior brother." Old Rulai hurriedly got up and returned his greeting. "Senior brother." The moment he got up, the other guardians, venerables, bodhisattvas, arhats and vajras all got up and said in unison, "Senior brother." After everyone was done with their greetings, old Rulai raised his hand to invite Qin Mu to sit beside him. The seat was a praying mat, and if he sat down there, he would be much lower than all the monks that were floating in the sky. Mu'er, just sit, old Ma said. When Qin Mu sat down, he felt a gentle force coming over which lifted him and the praying mat onto the back of the dragon Qilin, which was quite impressive. Old Rulai looked at old Ma and smiled. Disciple, are you finally willing to let go of the mortal world and return to the mountain? Return to the mountain? There's a Mount Meru in my heart, but there's no Buddha there anymore. Old Rulai smiled. When Mount Meru in your heart no more, you'll become Rulai. Excellent. Take out the wife and children from your heart and I'll pass away in a few days' time. This great thunderclap monastery will be yours to lead. Old Ma shook his head. If I was to lead this place, I'd kill all the damned Baldies on the mountain. The expressions of all the guardians and arhats changed drastically, and they became instantly furious. Old Rulai said, You still obstinately persist in going about things the wrong way. I came back slightly faster last time you were back on the mountain, but I was still a step late. You should know that the two of us still have the relationship of master and disciple. You had cut off your arm and sent it over, but I believed that you would let go of the affairs of the mortal world and return to Great Thunderclap Monastery, so I had ordered the monks to place your arm in Thousand Buddha's pagoda. That was because I wished for you to find your way back one day. You should understand my intentions. Old Ma said solemnly, I know, but my wife and children died at the hands of Great Thunderclap Monastery, and this blood feud will have to be paid in blood. Foolish disciple! Old Rulai shouted out in his face. Wife and children are just an illusion, just mortal flesh. If you have Buddha nature, you should know that the evil fruits of marriage all come to nothing. Furious, Old Ma shouted back, Nothing my ass! I had already chopped off my arm. What are you still dissatisfied about? Why did you have to kill my wife and children? What about my wife and children being pink skeletons? Demons that restrain me, so what if I like pink skeletons? Calling you master was giving you face because we need your help. Talk some more and I'll overthrow you. Bathe this golden peak in blood, and massacre all the bald donkeys on your mountain. The faces of all the monks on the mountain changed and none of them could sit still anymore. Qin Mu had totally not expected for Old Ma to suddenly blow up like that. Old Ma was usually the calm and dependable one in the village, the person that cripple respected the most. Because of this, Qin Mu had never expected that when Old Ma blew up, no one would be able to stop him. On the golden peak, dark clouds gathered. It was breezy earlier with magical clouds and golden lights which were very auspicious. However, murderous intent now filled the air. Qin Mu coughed loudly, then laughed. Minor details obscure the main point, it's just minor details. Senior brother Rulai, I have yet to introduce you to everyone. This is my grandpa Ma, who people usually call Old Ma, and his seniority is twice higher than mine. This is Granny C, whose seniority is twice higher than mine as well, and the same goes for Grandpa Blind. Fellow Tao brothers, there's no need for formalities. Old Rulai chuckled and the dark clouds in the sky disappeared. Cult Master Qin, there's destiny between us. You received the Kakara staff, which was the staff that had accompanied me through the martial world. Since it landed in your hands, you and I had the destiny of becoming master and disciple. Old Monk had decided to head to Great Ruins for a fated meeting with the old Tao Friends of Disabled Elderly Village to take you under our Great Thunderclap Monastery. So I didn't expect for our destiny to be broken just like that. When we met again, you had already become the Devil Cult Master of Heavenly Devil Cult. It just wasn't the time and destiny. Fate makes fools out of all of us. Qin Mu smiled slightly and said, Rulai is joking. Little brother has come forth this time to request Rulai to subdue a devil. In Granny C's body is a great expert which is the previous cult master of my sacred cult, Li Tianxing. He has transformed into a devil seedling and planted himself in Granny C's Tao heart. Thus little brother is here to request Rulai to subdue this devil, ridding the world of a public hazard. A venerable said softly, Revered one of the world. This Granny C is the previous saintess of Heavenly Devil Cult, Cu. On the night she married Li Tianxing, she murdered him. She's not a good person as well. She's a devil among the devils. All of the guardians and arhats said, These are the family matters of the devil cult. How could we interfere? Old Rulai raised his hand and smiled. All living things are equal. Buddhas are part of all living things, and devils are also part of all living things. Since Cult Master Qin has a request, Old Monk naturally should help. The gaze of the other venerable flickered as he said in a soft voice. When we give scriptures to people, we would accept some monetary offering. To help subdue the devil this time, could we? Old Rulai waved his hand to shut him up. Cult Mistress, can we see your true appearance? Qin Mu hesitated, then shook his head. Rulai, I don't think it's necessary, right? Blind knocked his bamboo cane against the ground and said, Old Rulai, there's no need to see Granny's true appearance. It won't be good if the cultivation of your monks got spoiled. Disputes regarding affections are ephemeral, and incomparably beautiful women are merely pink skeletons. Dao friend, you underestimate the cultivation of the monks of my great Thunderclap monastery. Old Rulai smiled. It would be hard to lend a hand and enlighten Cult Master Li without seeing the true appearance of the cult mistress. For Cult Master Li, love stemmed from beauty, giving birth to the demon of temptation. Old Monk merely wants to take a look at this object of his love. Granny C giggled. Blind old Ma, why don't you undo my seal? Cult Master Qin, take off this ugly skin off my body. I want to see these hypocritical monks. Take a look at their determination. Blind frowned slightly and said in a low voice, Old Ma, what's your opinion? Old Ma hesitated for a moment, then looked at the monks that filled the mountain. Old Rulai's Buddhism far surpasses mine and should have this ability. Muer, what do you think? Qin Mu pondered and said, We'll just have to try even though it might not work. Grandpas, be on alert. We can't let Cult Master Li run away. Granny C chuckled. I've fought with this old bald donkey for countless years, so why would I run when there's such an interesting show here? I wouldn't run even if you chased me away. Old Ma sighed and took back the Spirit Buddha's primordial spirit from the heart of Granny's brows as he nodded to Blind. Blind stretched out his hand, and a silver-colored vital chi that was like a dragon flew out from Granny C's body, returning to Blind. Qin Mu went forward and gave a gentle cut. Granny C's skin split open and a remarkably beautiful woman took a step out. Her hair was like a waterfall as she slowly raised her head up. Looking around with her bright eyes, she swept her gaze past the face of each and every monk. The golden peak fell completely silent. Even the Buddha voice that was chanting the Buddhist scriptures paused at that instant. All the eminent monks that had achieved Tao felt their throats go parched and their hearts throbbed violently, while the prayer beads revolved quickly in their hands. Suddenly, the Buddha rays behind the head of one bodhisattva dispersed, and he dropped from the sky and fell into the valley below the clouds. After some time, the loud thump of a heavy object landing on the ground could be heard. Thump, thump. More heavy objects hit the ground, which was some of the arhats and vajras. The expression of old Rulai changed slightly, and he looked around in a hurry. All the monks had their eyes fixed on the body of that remarkably beautiful woman as the prayer beads in their hands revolved faster and faster. Tut! Old Rulai was about to shout out when he heard another voice. An arhat shouted out angrily and rushed towards Granny C. This is a demoness that can bewitch all living things. A heavenly devil. From the first look at her, a devil spawned in my heart, so I definitely have to kill her. I shall kill this devil for the world. Another Vajra swung his devil-subduing pestle, showing his 3 heads and 6 arms as he rushed towards Granny C. Suddenly, an old monk pushed his way to the front to block the arhat and Vajra. He tore his Buddhist robe off and pulled apart his prayer beads. He then laughed in a crazy manner. I'm used to arson and murder, never having cultivated the righteous fruit. I feel I've wasted the first half of my life eating vegetarian and reciting scriptures. After seeing such a beautiful woman, I'm certain I've wasted the first half of my life. But now, I'll be returning to the normal life. A few more arhats rushed forward, and chaos broke out on the golden peak. The yellow robe of old Rulai trembled, and the Buddha voice of Thousand Buddha's pagoda suddenly resonated, reciting thousands of Buddha scriptures at the same time to pull the monks fighting on the golden peak back to their senses. Everyone then sat down, deeply ashamed of themselves. Having to eat vegetarian and recite scriptures? What's the use of cultivating the righteous fruit? Isn't it better to enjoy without delay? I'm returning back to the normal life. Suddenly, an old monk leaped off the golden peak and disappeared into the distance. Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 249. Pink Skeleton. Silence filled the golden peak, so only the noise of the prayer beads revolving could be heard. Many Buddha rays behind the monks' heads had dispersed when they had fallen from the sky. Old Rulai looked around himself and saw the expressions of all the bodhisattvas, venerables, and arhats. Cult Master Li had used the beauty of Cuyu to appear in front of all the monks, messing up their wisdom and damaging their Buddha's heart, spawning impure thoughts. Even Rulai had executed his dharma just then and activated the corporeal bodies of numerous Rulai in Thousand Buddhist Pagoda. He could only suppress the monks for a moment. When the Buddha rays behind their heads dispersed and they fell from the sky, it signaled that their Buddha's heart had been destroyed. Buddhism paid attention to the religious practice of the heart. Once their Buddha's heart was destroyed and their fruit of karma was tainted, their state of mind would crumble. The ones dropping down were no longer monks but were now ordinary people. When they dropped from the sky, they would drop from the place high above the mortal world into the mortal world. Some of them would change their minds, repent, and be saved, but some would just leave Great Thunderclap Monastery and enter the mortal world to struggle and break free. However, with a secular heart, it would be hard for them to do so. Cuyu's beauty had made many of the higher-ups of Great Thunderclap Monastery fall, which was a great loss. However, the monastery couldn't blame Qin Mu and the rest. After all, they had already warned them, and it was old Rulai who insisted on wanting to see the true appearance of Granny C to test everyone's Buddha's heart. There were, of course, some Buddha's hearts that were stable and unmoved. These eminent monks were of different races, so even though Granny C was beautiful, they couldn't see it. Since they weren't human, they only saw her as mortal flesh. Your cultivation is not strong enough to be so attached to the appearance of the skin and not see the tathatu. Old Rulai looked around himself and guided the monks. You saw her beauty and felt unable to restrain yourself, yet you don't know that the beauty you see is what you feel is beautiful and not true beauty. For example, Senior Brother Hai Kong. Do you think she's beautiful? The person he mentioned was an eminent monk of a different race that had achieved Tao. He said, "She and I are of different races and I can't see her beauty." Old Rulai smiled. When a different race can't see the beauty, then it isn't true beauty, just skin. Beauty is in great truth, great thinking, and great wisdom. Cult Master Li. This skin that you're infatuated with isn't true beauty to every living being. It only lies in the human word. This clearly shows how narrow-minded you are. All the monks seemed to be enlightened, and Qin Mu also felt that his words were very logical. As expected of old Rulai, a person who had demonstrated great thinking. He might just be able to subdue Li Tianxing, this heart devil. Why Li Tianxing wanted to become Granny C was because Granny C was extremely beautiful and messed up his Tao heart. This brought out his evil intentions and made him want to become Granny C. The old woman chuckled. Old Rulai, there are 10,000 paths in this world, but all my heavenly saint cult occupies is the human word. Your Buddhism speaks of 10,000 paths, but can you take possession of all of them? Say no more. What ability do you have to subdue me? Old Rulai smiled and took out a bronze mirror which passed to a venerable beside him. Pass it to him. The venerable took the mirror and walked down the high platform to come to Granny C. When he saw her appearance, his heart throbbed violently, and he immediately shut his eyes so he couldn't see. Granny C took the mirror into her hands and looked fondly at her reflection while giggling. Truly, a remarkably beautiful woman. I still pity her. Most of the monks saw her seductive appearance and found it hard to restrain themselves. Old Rulai smiled. Flip over the mirror. Granny C did as told and saw a white skeleton there. It was her appearance after she died. What does Cult Master Li think? Old Rulai smiled. Even if you're a remarkably beautiful woman, you'll be merely bones after your life ends. Do you think a skeleton is pretty? Granny C threw the bronze mirror onto the floor and crushed it under her feet while saying nonchalantly, This is merely a trick to fool the ordinary people, saying things like pink skeletons or whatever. Rulai, I know logic, but I don't want to be like you, living in splendor in your afterlife. It's enough if I live my current life to its fullest extent. Seeking for the afterlife is merely a cowardly behavior. Your little trick won't be able to subdue me. If you think a mirror is able to enlighten me, why don't I take a stroll around your great Thunderclap Monastery to see if you will enlighten me first or if I'll enlighten all the young and old monks in your sect? Why don't you make a bet with me? Old Rulai frowned slightly and said, You have no wisdom. Blind also saw that things were turning bad and said, Tao brother, what wisdom? It's all nonsense. Why don't we make a move on him directly and subdue him? Old Rulai muttered to himself for a moment, then said, Cult Master Li is the devil cult master, so I shall bring him into Thousand Buddha's pagoda to subdue him. Monks, your determination is still shallow and your cultivations aren't there yet. All of you shall remain outside Thousand Buddha's pagoda to aid. All of the monks acknowledged this and walked down the high platform to gather around Thousand Buddha's pagoda. There were some monks that hurried out from inside, not daring to remain there. Old Rulai smiled. Cult Master Qin, you're also the devil cult master and have a deep devil nature. Since the ancient times, Buddhas and devils were always on separate sides. But since Cult Master is a guest who had come forth to seek help, I won't subdue you. However, during the time I'll be subduing Cult Master Li, I hope Cult Master will stay in Great Thunderclap Monastery to listen to the Dharma and resolve the evil tendencies in Cult Master's heart, so you can make fewer sins in the future. Old Ma and Blind's hearts were like a clear mirror. Old Rulai was trying to make them stay in Great Thunderclap Monastery. If he could enlighten them, it would naturally be the best, but if he couldn't, he just wouldn't let them leave. Qin Mu was elated and smiled. Senior brother is wise. In that case, we'll have to trouble you. I hope senior brother can subdue Cult Master Li, this devil, as soon as possible. It'll be a huge merit. Old Rulai smiled and instructed. Let these few benefactors stay in the monastery. A venerable hesitated. Revered one of the world, there are many places in the monastery that are the sacred grounds of our sect. If they barge into, let them be. There's nothing Great Thunderclap Monastery has to hide, said Old Rulai. Imperial Preceptor came forward and I showed him Rulai's Mahayana Sutra. So could the evil heavenly devil cult master be worse than Imperial Preceptor? Cult Master Qin is also one of all living things. There are no outsiders in Great Thunderclap Monastery. That venerable acknowledged this and came over to lead everyone. Qin Mu smiled. This senior brother, does the monastery have vegetarian food? I've been eating too much greasy stuff during New Year's and would like to eat something light. The venerable took a look at him and revolved his prayer beads, suppressing the thoughts to subdue the devil. If Cult Master stays in Great Thunderclap Monastery, we can provide you with a lifetime of vegetarian's food. Qin Mu laughed out loud and said to Blind, They aren't afraid of us eating them poor. Blind snorted coldly and asked, Old Ma, do you think Rulai can subdue Li Tianqing? Old Ma hesitated. If one Rulai isn't enough, there are 1,000 of them in Thousand Buddha's pagoda. They are all clear-natured existences that had seen the Tathata, so it's highly possible. However, they have all passed on and Cult Master Li is extremely extraordinary. What I'm afraid now is that Old Rulai will purposely not subdue Cult Master Li, but will trap Granny C in the pagoda. If she gets trapped there, we'll also be trapped here. The Venerable brought them to the guest rooms and said, Benefactors, feel free to stay here. The bookshelves have all the Buddhist scriptures, so feel free to browse through them. Qin Mu looked over and saw many scriptures as promised. Old Ma shook his head at him. The Buddhist scriptures here only have text and no divine arts. Just browse through them. The Venerable said, Divine arts are no match for karma. Does Ma Wangshan not know? Old Ma said indifferently, Without divine arts, how can one ward off karma? You're Rulai's disciple? This means you're my junior brother. Your realm is too low. Fall back. Don't try to act clever in front of me. The Venerable was ashamed and embarrassed, so he turned to leave. Blind sat down calmly. I and Old Ma are already old, so it's fine if we stay here. But Moor, you're the cult master of Heavenly Devil Cult. If you get trapped here forever, Won't you die of old age in this place? I'll find a chance to send you down the mountain. Qin Mu shook his head and said, We will wait until Granny C is well. Grandpa blind, Grandpa Ma. Since it's rare to come to Great Thunderclap Monastery, let us take a walk around. Old Ma revealed a smile. Didn't you want to see the 100 dragons' portraits for a long time? I shall bring you to the place where the reliefs are. Qin Mu was elated. The three of them walked out of the guest room to see an old monk sitting outside the door and reciting scriptures to the dragon Qilin. The fat monster had already fallen deep asleep and was snoring loudly. They even want to enlighten Fatty Dragon? Qin Mu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Monk, this fat ass needs to eat half a bucket of scarlet fire spirit pills every day. Can you feed him after you enlighten him? That old monk stopped his recital and gave him a glance. I can. Qin Mu was speechless. How rich. Continue. Old Ma then led the way, down a layer of clouds until they reached the middle of the mountain. Pointing forward, he said, That's the 100 dragons' portraits. Qin Mu looked over and saw numerous huge pillars. On each one, there was a relief of a heavenly dragon. Under the pillars, there were hundreds of monks that were observing the sculptures to comprehend their own path, skills, and divine arts from them. There was quite a number of monks that were trying out their divine arts, transforming their vital qi into forms of dragons that filled the sky. There were also Buddha rays shining brilliantly, which looked very extraordinary. Some monks were even exchanging blows, testing what they had just comprehended. A few old monks saw them coming over and immediately greeted Old Ma. Senior brother is here. Old Ma returned their greetings, not neglecting them. An old monk said with delight, Back then senior brother was in the limelight, and us here still remember senior brother's dashing appearance at that time. Qin Mu walked up in front of a dragon pillar to examine it in detail, exclaiming endlessly in admiration to himself. There were 100 forms of this heavenly dragon, and the stone carvings on this pillar had fully captured the posture of the majestic being. Old Ma was proficient in carving, and the sculptures he did with wood were vivid, so he should have imitated the carvings here before. 100 dragons' portraits were indeed crucial to cultivating Thunderclap 8 strikes, but what was even more important was still Rulai's Mahayana Sutra. Without it, it was hard to cultivate Thunderclap 8 strikes to its maximum. However, Qin Mu had already comprehended unity technique, and his attainments in Thunderclap 8 strikes weren't any weaker than if he had been cultivating Rulai's Mahayana Sutra. At this moment, he suddenly heard a voice aimed at him. The one that herds cows. Qin Mu turned his head back and saw a monk in white looking at him in astonishment. This monk looked slightly familiar, and Qin Mu suddenly realized who he was. So it's little monk Ming Xian. We've met before in Great Ruins Grandma Temple. The little monk was a student of old monk Jing Ming, who had brought him to find Old Ma and used the Kakura staff as a bet. Ming Xian was defeated by Qin Mu, and thus the Kakura staff had landed into Qin Mu's hands, though he then gave it away to the devil ape. Monk Ming Xian walked over with quick steps. He had grown quite a bit and was now slightly taller than Qin Mu. Puberty had only started for Qin Mu in the last half a year, so he'd had a spurt in growth, but it wasn't enough yet. Monk Ming Xian took a look at him and was eager to give a second try at a battle with him. We haven't met for a few years, and I wonder if your skills improved? Qin Mu sighed ruefully. They have. Since I defeated you, times changed and I improved by leaps and bounds. Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 250, Words Kill. When Qin Mu saw a familiar person, he couldn't help feeling affable. Since he was young, he had always mingled around with blind and cripple. From the moment he could remember things, he was always learning all kinds of knowledge from the 9 elders of disabled elderly village. Could be said that he didn't have any playmates during his childhood days, which made them dull and dry. Even though he had only fought one match with Monk Ming Xian, they were of the same age, so it was natural to feel affable upon meeting him again. Monk Ming Xian recited one of the many names of Buddha to suppress his own angry thoughts and smiled. You defeated me back then, but you might not defeat me today. After losing to you, I had pondered about the painful experience and fixed my weakness. Why don't you have another battle? You changed the sutra? Qin Mu asked in astonishment. Pleased, Monk Ming said, I was defeated when you struck my throat the previous time, so I will definitely not let you have your way this time. Qin Mu cried out, Monk Ming Xian, how old are you? How could you change Rulai's Mahayana Sutra as you like? With your current horizons and knowledge, the more you change it, the more mistakes and flaws would take shape. Rather than carelessly changing it, wouldn't it have been better to ask Rulai and let Rulai teach you? I also carelessly changed my technique, and to the point it's beyond recognition, so I can't really say anything to you. Qin Mu blushed with shame. He had also changed his technique, and Overlord Body 3 Elixir technique had been changed more than once. Great educational Heavenly Devil Scriptures was even fused with his it, solving the flaw on the left shoulder. Him saying something to Monk Ming Xian about carelessly changing his technique was like the pot calling the kettle black. Maybe the other had indeed erased the flaw on his throat. Monk Ming Xian began to stir and said, In that case, could you condescend to teach? Qin Mu was about to say something when an old monk said, Disciple, don't be impudent. This is Cult Master Qin of Heavenly Devil Cult. Monk Ming Xian jumped in shock and cried out, When have you become the old devil of Heavenly Devil Cult? Qin Mu sighed. This is hard to explain. I didn't want to do it, but got pushed onto the seat of the cult master without the choice to refuse. He looked toward the old monk and recognized him as old monk Jing Ming. This old monk was Ming Xian's master, and his personality was very much like his name, very shrewd. He had pointed out that Qin Mu was the devil cult master of Heavenly Devil Cult not to notify Ming Xian, but to tell all the monks that were present. With the shout in his loud voice, all the monks that were studying 100 Dragons' portraits looked towards Qin Mu and recited the many names of Buddha under their breath. It was evident that they all couldn't restrain themselves and suppress their thoughts of wanting to subdue the devil. Monk Ming Xian immediately said, In that case, you should quickly withdraw and not be the devil cult master anymore, since you're going to die. There are many eminent monks who hate evil with a passion and are used to killing devils. Every time they go out, they subdue a few devils to accumulate merit, and you will be killed. I shan't compete with you, you should quickly flee down the mountain. Qin Mu shook his head. Thank for your kind intentions, but I'm now a guest. Old Rulai is my senior brother, and he said I should be allowed to say in the monastery. In this case, would they still subdue the devil? Ming Xian hesitated for a moment, then said, This I can't say for sure. They will most likely debate with you, advising you to turn over a new leaf. If they can't talk you into it, they will most likely beat you to death. Qin Mu was speechless. He indeed saw a few monks walking over to him. Amitba. A monk placed his palms together and raised a difficult question first. Devil, do you dare to debate with me? Qin Mu asked, Have you been completely indifferent to worldly temptations? That monk was slightly shaken. Not yet. Then what's the debate for? Qin Mu broke out into laughter. You haven't even achieved your Tao. A half-baked, fake monk like you has only the ability to flaunt misunderstandings from gossip. Fall back. That monk was tongue-tied, and another monk beside him immediately said, Devil, I shall talk to you about truth, compassion, and beauty. Qin Mu asked, Are you Rulai? That monk's complexion turned beet red, and he replied, I'm still not Rulai. Then you haven't achieved the word truth. Qin Mu smiled. Rulai is the true state of things, receiving and achieving the word truth. If you aren't the truth yourself, how can you want to talk about truth, compassion, and beauty? Fall back, don't embarrass yourself, we will talk when you achieve that height. Old Ma shook his head. If I was to lead this place, I'd kill all the damned baldies on the mountain. The expressions of all the guardians and arhats changed drastically, and they became instantly furious. Old Rulai said, You still obstinately persist in going about things the wrong way. I came back slightly faster last time you were back on the mountain, but I was still a step late. You should know that the two of us still have the relationship of master and disciple. You had cut off your arm and sent it over, but I believed that you would let go of the affairs of the mortal world and return to Great Thunderclap Monastery. So I had ordered the monks to place your arm in Thousand Buddhist Pagoda. That was because I wished for you to find your way back one day. You should understand my intentions. Old Ma said solemnly, I know. But my wife and children died at the hands of Great Thunderclap Monastery, and this blood feud will have to be paid in blood. Foolish disciple, old Rulai shouted out in his face. Wife and children are just an illusion, just mortal flesh. If you have Buddha nature, you should know that the evil fruits of marriage all come to nothing. Furious, old Ma shouted back, "Nothing my ass. I had already chopped off my arm. What are you still dissatisfied about? Why did you have to kill my wife and children? What about my wife and children being pink skeletons? Demons that restrain me, so what if I like pink skeletons? Calling you master was giving you face because we need your help. Talk some more and I'll overthrow you. Bathe this golden peak in blood, and massacre all the bald donkeys on your mountain." The faces of all the monks on the mountain changed and none of them could sit still anymore. Qin Mu had totally not expected for old Ma to suddenly blow up like that. Old Ma was usually the calm and dependable one in the village, the person that cripple respected the most. Because of this, Qin Mu had never expected that when old Ma blew up, no one would be able to stop him. On the golden peak, dark clouds gathered. It was breezy earlier with magical clouds and golden lights which were very auspicious. However, murderous intent now filled the air. Qin Mu coughed loudly, then laughed. Minor details obscure the main point, it's just minor details. Senior brother Rulai, I have yet to introduce you to everyone. This is my grandpa Ma, who people usually call Old Ma, and his seniority is twice higher than mine. This is Granny C, whose seniority is twice higher than mine as well, and the same goes for Grandpa Blind. Fellow Dao brothers, there's no need for formalities. Old Rulai chuckled and the dark clouds in the sky disappeared. Cult Master Qin, there's destiny between us. You received the Kakara staff, which was the staff that had accompanied me through the martial world. Since it landed in your hands, you and I had the destiny of becoming master and disciple. Old Monk had decided to head to Great Ruins for a fated meeting with the old Dao Friends of Disabled Elderly Village to take you under our Great Thunderclap Monastery. So I didn't expect for our destiny to be broken just like that. When we met again, you had already become the Devil Cult Master of Heavenly Devil Cult. It just wasn't the time and destiny. Fate makes fools out of all of us. Qin Mu smiled slightly and said, Rulai is joking. Little brother has come forth this time to request Rulai to subdue a devil. In Granny C's body is a great expert which is the previous cult master of my sacred cult, Li Tianxing. He has transformed into a devil seedling and planted himself in Granny C's Dao heart. Thus little brother is here to request Rulai to subdue this devil, ridding the world of a public hazard. A venerable said softly, Revered one of the world. This Granny C is the previous saintess of Heavenly Devil Cult, Cu. On the night she married Li Tianxing, she murdered him. She's not a good person as well. She's a devil among the devils. All of the guardians and arhats said, These are the family matters of the devil cult. How could we interfere? Old Rulai raised his hand and smiled. All living things are equal. Buddhas are part of all living things, and devils are also part of all living things. Since Cult Master Qin has a request, Old Monk naturally should help. The gaze of the other venerable flickered as he said in a soft voice, When we give scriptures to people, we would accept some monetary offering. To help subdue the devil this time, could we? Old Rulai waved his hand to shut him up. Cult Mistress, can we see your true appearance? Qin Mu hesitated, then shook his head. Rulai, I don't think it's necessary, right? Blind knocked his bamboo cane against the ground and said, Old Rulai, there's no need to see Granny's true appearance. It won't be good if the cultivation of your monks got spoiled. The monk held the beautiful flower in both of his hands as his expression became more and more defeated. He felt the beauty of the tender flower becoming sinister and terrifying, demanding his life. Suddenly, the monk sat down in a lotus position with tears rolling down his face. I've eaten countless people from your race and my grave sins are hard to resolve. I'm willing to turn into a pile of ashes to nourish you. When he was finished with his words, the fire of karma lit up around his body and burned him cleanly in an instant. But even though the fire burned him completely, it didn't harm the beautiful flower in the slightest. It landed softly onto the ashes, still tender and lovely. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Cultivating Buddhism still comes to naught at the end, only good enough to be used as fertilizer. Qin Mu bent over and gathered the ashes together to plant the flower seedling. Monk, you have been useless all your life, but you are finally useful after you died. This flower will grow well, and it will bear many seedlings which will grow into even more flowers. You will be gratified if you know this in the netherworld. Even though the flower isn't the common people, but by using your ashes as fertilizer, you have indeed achieved that goal of the everyday use of common people. Excellent, you and I are of the same path. He stood up and looked around. Even though he was a youth, he had the air of a cult master about him as he said unhurriedly, "Which great monk still wants to debate with me?" The surroundings were silent. Qin Mu looked at the serious and solemn monks, but the other side immediately avoided his eyes, not daring to meet them. Old Ma and Blind had been standing far away, chatting with some old monks. When they saw what happened, Blind smiled. If Moor remains in Great Thunderclap Monastery, and the monks don't immediately make a move to slay him, with just a few days' time, half of the monks in Great Thunderclap Monastery will return to the normal life. A small half will be possessed by the devil, while those who won't will all be fake monks. He's really even more powerful than Granny C. Suddenly, a monk shouted sternly, "He's the devil! He's a heavenly devil, bewitching everyone with his demonic words." Another monk shouted out right after, "He used demonic words to kill senior brother Xian Kong. We can't let this devil live. Kill him to get rid of the devil." In an instant, everyone was furious and shouted out their wish to subdue Qin Mu and kill the devil. At that moment, the youth started laughing with merriment, his voice growing louder and louder. The commotion around him gradually vanished, but his laughter still continued on. Once laughing subsided, Qin Mu said coldly, "You guys wanted to debate, so I debated with you. When you wanted to pull in the sect's teachings, I agreed to talk about the teachings. When you couldn't win against me, you guys talked about taking the life of a living creature. Fine with me, let's talk about taking the life of a living creature. When you couldn't succeed even in that, you guys actually want to kill me. What's the use of you cultivating Buddhism? Fall back. Return to your normal life." Some monks were at a loss and their hearts became empty. After a moment, some actually sighed and really turned away and went to pack their luggage to leave the mountain. The rest of the monks didn't fall back but stood with unpleasant expressions. Qin Mu shook his head and smiled. "So it still comes to fighting in the end? If that's how it is, why flaunt your inadequate knowledge first?" With a roused spirit, he looked around, and his eyes flashed like lightning. "Who's coming to die?"